The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
And welcome back to Thom Hartmann University, the Thom Hartmann Book Club. Today we're reading from Attention Deficit Disorder, A Different Perception. I think it's the only book that I've written that Time Magazine has done a story on. This is, we're in chapter 14. Throughout the book, I explain the whole idea of hunters and farmers, that ADD characteristics are something that would help in a hunting-gathering society. They become a liability in an agricultural society. And so this chapter is titled The Edison Trait, Hunters Who Have Changed the World. Hunters sometimes have difficulty answering the question, what do you do for a living? It's not that there isn't an answer, there are too many answers. Hunters of above average or even genius intelligence often have resumes that are startling in their diversity and accomplishment, even though they may have struggled to simply finish high school. Similarly, the stereotype of the eccentric genius or loony creative type is often applied to hunter inventors, artists, writers, and designers. At many ad agencies, the creative types are allowed or even encouraged to have an eccentric appearance with flowered shirts, long hair, jeans, etc. As the chapter on ADD and creativity pointed out, the ability to think innovatively is intrinsically tied to the ability to fall into an open and therefore distractible state of consciousness, one of the characteristics of ADHD. Conversely, to make use of the inspirations gained from such typical hunter-free association, there must be a compensating burst of focused energy in order to bring these concepts into reality. Learning to channel these bursts is the challenge to every hunter. When hunters fail in life, it is often because their self-image was distorted in an early age when they were labeled as a problem. Their assets are also neglected if they plug into a job or a segment of society which requires farmer rather than hunter skills. But let's look at some successful hunters in history who have demonstrated tremendous powers of transformation, vitality, and dynamic energy, and whose biographies appear to conform to the American Psychiatric Association's DSM criteria of ADHD. While it's impossible for us to reach back to historic figures and ask them to answer the questions which might lead to a medically supportable diagnosis of ADHD, their life stories very often give us those answers in a rather overt fashion. Consider the following. The life of Thomas Alva Edison has been an inspiration to hunter boys for nearly a century. Born in the Midwest before the Civil War, Edison wrote, quote, I remember I used never to be able to get along at school. I was always at the foot of the class. I used to feel that the teachers did not sympathize with me and that my father thought I was stupid. Edison complained about the distractions of the other children in his school and the fact that learning was abstract and not real. To be able to actually do something, to test a theory or discover a fact through experience, he wrote in his diary, quote, for one instant was better than learning about something he had never seen for 2 hours, end quote. Believing her son had potential, Edison's mother took over his schooling. Instead of requiring her son to learn a particular curriculum by rote, she instead encouraged him to explore things he found interesting. He soon became a voracious reader and consumed a huge body of knowledge in a wide variety of subjects. Edison left home at the age of 12 and started a long procession of short-lived jobs. The year he was 17, he held 4 different jobs, being fired from each one because of his inattentiveness to the duties or routine of the job. When he was 15, he had a job as a railroad signalman during the night and had to clock in via telegraph every hour. He was fired when his superiors learned that his punctual check-in signal was actually transmitted by a simple invention he'd created from an alarm clock, which would send the Morse code signal on the hour. That invention led to his developing the first automatic telegraph and then the first stock ticker, although he held a dozen more jobs before he received $40,000 for his stock ticker at age 21 and was able to use that money to establish a laboratory where he could devote himself to inventing. Being a classic hunter, Edison usually worked on many projects at the same time. In the year of 1877, for example, we now know that he had more than 40 inventions in process in his laboratory concurrently. He kept his own hours, often working through the night. When he became bored or saturated with one invention, he would quickly hop to another. Edison credited his inability to stick to one task for a long time as being the power of his creative efforts. He wrote, quote, look, or he said, quote, look, I start here with the intention of going there, drawing an imaginary line, in an experiment, say, to increase the speed of the Atlantic cable. But when I've arrived part of the way in my straight line, I meet with a phenomena, and it leads me off in another direction to something totally unexpected, end of quote. Thomas Edison transformed the 20th century with his invention of the electric light bulb, the central power generating station, the phonograph, the flexible celluloid film and movie projector, the alkaline storage battery, and the microphone, merely a few of the more than 1,000 major patents he registered before his death in 1931. Benjamin Franklin flunked out of George Brownell's academy after only 2 years of formal education. It was said that he was slow at doing sums, math, and he utterly failed in arithmetic. His teacher complained that he would never pay attention to his lessons. He spent 2 years as an apprentice candlemaker to his father, but his father's frustrations with young Ben were legion. The boy was always slipping off to explore the town, the salt marshes, and the incoming ships. Having demonstrated his hunter inability to be a scholar in the formal farmer schools of the day, Franklin went on to become one of the most well-educated in terms of practical abilities men in American history. Although he couldn't stick with a single job, Franklin is now he was a printer, moralist, civic leader, essayist. When at the age of 16, he wrote several articles for the Courant, a Boston newspaper making fun of Boston's authorities and society figures. Anyhow, the book is Attention Deficit Disorder, A Different Perception.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. A lot in the news, a lot going on. Donald Trump talking about how he's the victim of a witch hunt. Let's see. Is this about Benghazi? I don't think so, yeah. Is this about maybe he wasn't a natural-born citizen? This is so sad. Roger Ailes has died. They say don't speak, only speak good of the dead. So Roger Ailes has died. Good. I personally think this man has done more damage to the American body politic than probably any other person living in my lifetime. And while I send my condolences to his family and his friends, and apparently he had a number of them. I mean, you know, nobody is all evil or all good. I'm not going to join in the media orgy of, oh, he was really a wonderful guy, you know, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, enough on that. Last night, Louise and I were sitting in we've got a kind of little clubhouse at the marina where we spend most of our time. And with a friend of ours who just came down from Vermont, who's here in town doing, she's staying on our boat for a couple of days. She's working with an environmental activist group, and with a friend of ours who lives, you know, in the next marina over and has lived on this boat of his for like 20 years or something. And he's my age. And we were just talking, and his name is Roger. And Roger was telling us a story about how every year there's a Chinese restaurant that backs up to us. I'm assuming this is what he was talking about, although it might have been just food, you know, from the clubhouse or something. But anyhow, he said every year when the used rice gets 3 or 4 or 5 days old, when the big old pots of rice that they cook, they throw them out. And this is not the dry rice that can kill birds. This is the cooked rice, which is food for birds. And he said, and so what he does, you know, every fall, basically, is he goes around and he gathers, you know, ends up with a garbage bag full of old, out-of-date, not good for people rice anymore, and it's great for birds. And whenever he sees birds, he feeds them. He's been doing this for 25 years. He said last year, it was the first year that he didn't empty the bag. He didn't even empty a third of the bag. He said, I got to tell you, Tom, the birds are gone. And my aunt, our friend from Vermont, or actually our best friend's daughter from Vermont, who's, you know, this activist and staying with us, a young adult. She was like, you know, in Vermont, they're talking about the same thing about the fireflies. Where'd all the fireflies go? Because they're visible, you know, at night. I grew up with them in Michigan. And then Roger and I started talking about how when we were kids, I can't remember a summer day when I was a kid when I didn't see a butterfly. We used to chase them. It was a big thing for you know, those of us who were geeky science kids in, you know, 5th grade to get a net. My dad actually got me a net and a butterfly mounting kit. And, you know, you'd go around and you'd try to catch one of each species. And I had all these little moths, the white ones and green ones and yellow ones. And I had, you know, a monarch butterfly and the swallowtail butterfly. We had some ether. You could actually buy that, you know, in the science store. I guess you can't now because you can get high off it. But and so you'd, you know, anesthetize the butterfly and then, you know, put them on a little display, you know, because there were so many of them. They were all over the place. And there was like, you know, half a dozen of us kids running around with these nets, you know. And I don't think that we're the ones who wiped out the butterflies, frankly. But my point is, I remember when butterflies were just absolutely ubiquitous. I've seen one this year. And I live down on the waterfront. I live in an area that's surrounded by trees and forest on the Potomac River. It is supposed to be filled with wildlife. A few months ago, it was duck screwing season, as in the ducks, you know, getting it on. Louise has a more colorful term for it that I can't say on the air. Duck blanking. And because it's something we all notice because they're very loud and it seems rather violent. I mean, the duck on the bottom gets pushed under the water and is fighting to breathe and all this kind of stuff. You know, in the last, we've been living down here 6-7 years, I think, on the waterfront. And every year there's, you know, a dozen families of ducks running around. I mean, ducks are just dumber than geese, I got to tell you. The geese mothers are very protective of their babies. The duck mothers just kind of hand them off from one to the other, and sometimes they just get lost, and, you know, the duck mother just is like oblivious, right? Ducks are dumb. But they're still around, except that they're not around. We were comparing notes with a few of the other people living down the marina. We only know of one duck pair with 3 ducklings in the entire marina this year. Whereas last year it was like 10, 15, 20. Are you seeing this where you live? I realize this is, you know, well, maybe this is a huge talk radio topic. Roger actually wrote this down for me. He said Virgil, you know, I think Virgil was, I think, a Greek philosopher or writer. Roman. Thank you, Troy. Troy knows all these things. Virgil called hell Averno, A-V-E-R-N-O, which literally translates into a place without birds. So anyhow, I wanted to share that with you. Donald Trump being persecuted. There has been an independent counsel appointed to investigate collusion, the possibility of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians or the Russian government or Russian hackers or whatever it may turn out to be or not be, to look into that. And of course, that investigation has already metastasized into Flynn and Manafort. And I'm waiting for Pence to be the next domino that falls. But in the meantime, Politico is reporting, and I thought this was interesting. Oh, this is one that didn't print out on me this morning. Politico is reporting that Mike Pence just started a political action committee, which is something that vice presidents generally don't do. Oh, I actually do have this. While President Donald Trump This is from Bloomberg by Bill Allison. While President Donald Trump's White House grapples with the fallout from his firing of his former FBI director, Vice President Mike Pence has taken steps to begin building his own political war chest. Pence launched Great America Committee, a leadership PAC, a movement that will enable him to channel money to congressional Republicans ahead of the 2018 midterms. It was posted Wednesday. He did this yesterday. It's unusual, writes Bill Allison over at Bloomberg. It's unusual for vice presidents to set up their own fundraising vehicles. Neither Joe Biden nor Dick Cheney, the two vice presidents who preceded Pence, had one while in office. Not entirely unprecedented, George Herbert Walker Bush had one when he was preparing for his own 1988 presidential run. But, you know, everybody knew Ronald Reagan was term limited, and Bush the elder was going to be the nominee. So, of course, he started one. Sheila Krumholtz, the executive editor of the Center for Responsible Politics, says launching a leadership PAC sometimes signals an intent to run for higher office, which in Pence's case has been a topic of public interest ever since he was first nominated. This is getting very interesting as our boy child president is preparing to go overseas. And apparently our State Department is literally warning overseas diplomats and overseas people with whom he'll be speaking. Try to keep your conversations to 3 or 4 minutes. Try not to go more than 4 or 5 sentences. Don't embroach complex issues. He will get lost. This is concerning is not a strong enough word. Oh, and then there's this this transcript that was just released a year. It took a whole year. I keep telling you, the Republican Party is like, you know, the mafia under RICO, right? Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization. So Kevin McCarthy and Paul Ryan are with a group of Republicans, and apparently some Republican in that group recorded this, and I'm just going to read it to you. And just when if you watch the Godfather movies, I mean, the mob is always referred to as the family, right? What's in the family stays in the family, right? Right, Vito? And, so anyhow, here's the transcript. McCarthy, the Russians hacked the DNC and got Oppo research they had on Trump. He laughs. Crosstalk. Ryan, the Russians hacked the DNC McHenry to get Oppo, Ryan on Trump and delivered it to who? McCarthy. There's two people I think Putin pays, Rohrabacher and Trump. Swear to God. Ryan, this is off the record. No leaks. And he laughs. All right? And then Ryan says, this is how we know we're a real family here. Steve Scalise says, that's how you know that we're tight. And then they all laugh again. And then Paul Ryan says, what's said in the family stays in the family. Tell me this is not the mob. This is like bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. So anyhow, a lot going on here today. I have more news to share with you, as well as I'm curious about your take on things. Also, there's, the economic stuff. The Dow dropped like crazy yesterday. Today it seems to have stabilized. There's new numbers on household debt that are downright spooky you need to take a look at also. We'll be talking about all this stuff later.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So stick around. We'll pick up some phone calls. We'll share some more news. We'll see what are your thoughts on some of the news of the day. I've shared some of mine. More to come. And welcome back. Mike Pence apparently lying, it's interesting, about when he knew about Mike Flynn and Turkey and, Erdogan's security guys and pro-Erdogan thugs breaking through police lines here in Washington, D.C. and beating the bejesus out of a bunch of protesters. I mean, it's just incredible. Anyhow, Don, watching Free Speech TV in Seattle, Washington. Hey, Don, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. I called you several months ago about the One Belt, One Road project connecting Russia with Alaska. following up on the old Silk Road philosophy of connecting the world economically and whatnot, and China's.
Well, the One Belt, One Road is connecting China to Europe.
Oh, well, but also part of that project, and China is the main people.
Are you thinking of the Trans-Siberian Railway? I mean, that's been around for a while.
Yeah, because they're
that goes back to back before World War II.
Yeah, well, I was there. Want to dig a tunnel under the Bering Sea and connect the Kamchatka Peninsula with Alaska, with railway, highway, oil pipelines, and whatnot. And I mentioned it several months ago, and at the time I didn't know who were the people locally producing the documentary about it, but it's the Lyndon LaRouche Committee. He came up with the idea many, many years ago, and China's into it, Russia. They want to involve North Korea, South Korea.
Oh, my God.
And it would connect the world, and it would essentially add to world security and whatnot. And
I don't think so. And if the LaRouches say it, Don, you know, at that point, I just check out. But I did, you know, and I shared this on the air day before yesterday. We had a piece in the New York Times about how the Chinese are investing $1 trillion in infrastructure around the road, and that is one dimension of it. Don, I got to move along, but thanks for the call. Dion in Round Lake, Illinois. Hey, Dion, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Yeah, I came across a disturbing article on SealHedge.com. The title is 1 million will march on Washington if they impeach Trump, and they will be armed. And the contributor was Bon Scott, who happens to be a libertarian. And
yeah, Zero Hedge is a right-wing website.
Yeah, so I want to know, what do you think about that as a Gestapo tactic? And also, if they do impeach Trump, I will be part of the resistance and marching to Washington this summer. So what's your thoughts?
You'll be the resistance to whom? To what? To the impeachment?
Yes.
So you don't think Trump should be impeached?
Well, I think he should be impeached, but if there is a case and evidence, I will march with progressives.
Uh-huh. And if there's not, he won't be impeached, right? It's pretty straightforward. I mean, they're either going to find something or they're not. And, you know, and now that Mueller is in charge of this thing, he is not the, you know, when Trump said that Comey was a showboater, there's an element of truth to that. And it doesn't necessarily reflect poorly on him. You know, you know, there's a lot of people who you know, don't avoid the public eye, but Mueller is one who traditionally has. He's one of these guys who kind of keeps his head down. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of drama around this unless Donald Trump creates it, and he seems to have gotten off to a good start this morning. Dion, thanks for the call. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Heather with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to sustain for more than 20 years. Now, you can give to Free Speech TV through the Branch of Gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the Branch of Gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the Branch of Gratitude today.
Back, Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's see here. Rick in Kent, Washington. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind today?
Well, I've been living up here for about 30 years, actually, in the same house. And, you know, managed to, you know, we've watched birds our whole life, me and my wife. And, you know, the Seattle area historically has miserable springs. Joke is always July 5th is the first day of summer.
Right.
So, you know, June sucks, May sucks. We've always had goldfinch, tanagers, grosbeak, evening grosbeak, just exotic birds. This whole global warming, weather has changed here dramatically, and for about 6 or 7 years, we've had decent springs. All those birds were gone. Well, whatever is going on this year, we've got a good old-fashioned Seattle spring. Boom, all of our birds are back. So,
well, that's interesting. So you're seeing birds there. So is it, you know, because last night, I mean, we were sitting around going, are we killing the Earth? And it might just be that things are just like moving to other places as a consequence of global warming.
well, and, you know, we've got I don't know if the luxury or not, but we've lived in the same house for 30 years. So, and we've always been observant of nature and literally have seen this shift back and forth. And, you know, that's kind of my point is, you know, I attribute it to just changing weather, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Which might be changing climate, or it might just be locally changing weather. My aunt was saying that they had some bird feeders up in Vermont, and they were noticing some differences, but she wasn't, you know, she couldn't quantify it. That was just anecdotal. So interesting. Rick, thanks for the call. Thanks for sharing your story. Holly in Iron Mountain, Michigan. Hey, Holly, what's up?
Oh, good afternoon. We've had the same, you know, experience with birds. When we moved up here 25 years ago.
Now, if I may interrupt you, my recollection is Iron Mountain's in the Upper Peninsula, right?
Yes, yes.
So you're in way northern Michigan.
Well, not way northern. We're on the Wisconsin border, so yeah, not near Lake Superior, but yeah, it's north enough for us.
Yeah.
Anyway, we had an abundance of grosbeaks, rose-breasted grosbeaks, evening grosbeaks, pine grosbeaks, buntings, snow buntings, indigo buntings, and we feel blessed if we get to see one once in a while. They've they've vanished, and it's you know, this was one of the joys of living here was our beautiful bird population, and we've lost, I would say, 85% of our birds.
Wow. You know, Rachel Carlson's the title of her book, Silent Spring, referred to a spring without birds.
Well, we have goldfinches, and we have our chickadees are always with us, and our nuthatches, and our woodpeckers. We live in a log house, so they like our house, so we know we've got woodpeckers.
So there are still some birds left, but a lot.
We have some birds. And quickly, before you go to break, I have to tell you that I'm Norwegian. I have several relatives in Norway, some of which were just here this year, and they equally think we're crazy.
Yeah, I think all of Europe thinks we're crazy. Holly, thank you for the call. Thank you very much. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. We're reading from Death in the Pines, a novel set in Vermont. You have to be crazy to do this. On a morning when the Vermont winter sun shone pale and weak across 6 crisp inches of fresh snow, when the temperature hovered somewhere between 20 and 25 degrees Fahrenheit, I spent a long time searching for 10 stones. They had to be the right stones, of a certain weight and shape, heavy but not so heavy they exhausted me, rounded but not so much that they would roll from the place I set them. It took hours to find all 10 of them, searching in the sheltered places where the dry, powdery snow was easier to scrape aside. But then they had to be lugged to the spot I had selected, mindless beast of burden work that made me sweat inside my downline jacket. I stacked the stones carefully into a hollow, truncated pyramid. Anyone coming across that pile of stones in 10 or 100 years would know they weren't dropped there haphazardly by a retreating glacier. This was a made thing, too small to be a cairn, too insignificant to be the remnants of a wall. I guess you could call it an altar. The ashes were in a bronze urn, far too small to contain the spirit of my friend John Lincoln. The container had stood on the shelf in my cabin for too many months. The new year had just arrived, and with it a belated first snowfall of the season, and the combination of the two had finally persuaded me it was time to do something about the urn. Holding it in the chill, near silence of the forest, I stood over the structure I'd made and looked off into the distance, seeing but not seeing the brownish shafts of pines streaked with snow, the bare gray trunks of maples, the white and gray columns of birch, the deep shaded greens of white burdened firs. At that moment, the urn felt heavier than the stones themselves. This was why I was here. The mind drifts at such times. Even after 6 years, I could recall the particular night that had caused me to travel to this place. On that night, my mentor, no, by that time my friend, John and I had been slumped in the rotting front seat of an ancient rusting 55 Ford, parked in the heavy, humid midnight of Central America. Despite the choking reek of insect repellent, voracious mosquitoes whined in through the open windows, and from time to time we slapped an offender, reducing it to a crumble of tissue to be flicked off with a fingertip. Still warmer than blood heat even at that hour. The dark air sizzled with cicadas. We had left our home base in Atlanta a week before and had taken a circuitous route to this dark clearing hacked from the jungle. We were waiting for either 3 or 4 men to emerge from a blacked-out warehouse, and we had no idea whether those men knew we were watching or how well they might be armed. What we would do depended on how many came out. If only 3, we'd move in and recover what had been stolen. 4 would make the recovery problematic, because that would mean that at least one of the men would be a local, complicating the calculus of violence. As I stood over the stone altar, every detail of our conversation went through my mind. A tape rewound and replayed. By that point in our lives, John and I had been partners for so long that we didn't BS each other, had no need to strain for machismo, no use for phony heartiness. We were a good team. We could finish each other's sentences, catch body language signals that amounted to a silent code, recognize unspoken concerns and anxieties in time to be prepared for the unexpected. We told all our jokes to each other years before. Once in a while, one of us might mutter 2 or 3 words of a punchline. The other would chuckle in appreciation or exasperation as the mood took him. That night, in stop-and-start fashion, we had each spoke of good times we'd had. Waiting in the dark gave each of us a natural urge to talk. That was the one and only time that John had spoken of his quiet way in the forested hills of Vermont, thinking of the coolness of a New England autumn in that hellish tropic night. I'd never known that he'd been to Vermont. He had lived in Buckhead, a suburb of Atlanta, the whole time I'd known and worked with him. But in those suffocating hours of darkness, cool green Vermont was on his mind. Beautiful place, very peaceful, he said. I'd like to go back there when it's all over. I didn't have time to ask what he meant or what would be over. The job, the summer, the career, the life. At that moment, dim yellow light from a kerosene lantern appeared on the black face of the warehouse. First a line, then a thin rectangle, then a fat square as the 3 men inside pushed open the double doors. John and I climbed out of our borrowed car and did our job. In the 6 years that followed that night, John never had gone back to Vermont, had never spoken of it again. And now for him, it really was all over. After the memorial service, after the will was probated, I didn't feel like hanging around Atlanta. So I made arrangements, gave most of my liquid assets to a community for abused kids in New Hampshire, and bought a cabin on 200 acres in the woods of Vermont. It was here I'd brought my old friend to the place he'd talked about. Pondering the finality of it all, I held the urn containing his ashes, a few bone fragments and pieces of his teeth, ready to fulfill a promise I had never made. Such a time demands words. I took a deep breath of icy air and looked up toward the top of a towering birch. A squirrel made an untidy, tangled nest up there in the highest branches, and the animal itself, or maybe another squirrel, who could tell, hung below the nest, head down in the trunk, apparently gazing at me. I imagined the squirrel's bright black eye held accusation. The fall had gone on so long, probably for half the animal's lifetime. So what was the idea of all this snow? Was I to blame? Clearing my throat, I reached far back into memory, groping for the prayers I had last recited as a child. I heard myself say, "Dear God." My words took flight toward the washed-out sky on puffs of vapor. As far as I could tell, no one heard them but me and the squirrel. My voice had a harsh tone even to my own ears, a rusty hinge catch. The book is Death in the Pines. It's an Oakley Tyler novel based in Vermont.
Welcome back. The Hill is reporting that the Federal Communications Commission Chairman Ajit Pai's plan to roll back net neutrality took its first step forward on Thursday. The commission voted 2-1 along party lines to advance Pai's, quote, restoring internet freedom proposal. That would be freedom for big corporations to censor you on the internet, to charge you more money on the internet, to make much more profit off you on the internet, to screw you on the internet. I mean, you know, financially anyway. Which would repeal current net neutrality protections. Thursday's vote opens a period of public input before the agency advances the proposal. So they got hundreds of thousands of responses. When you separate out the bot responses on their website, 96% of the humans who responded to the FCC said keep net neutrality, and the Republicans, the 2 Republicans out of the 3 on the FCC commission, on the you know, because there's still some open seats, but they'll be replaced by Republicans anyway. The Republicans on the FCC just said, you know, okay, let's start the process. So, you know, this isn't it's not over, but it's moving forward. The only thing that can stop the FCC right now, frankly, is Congress. And, you know, are the Republicans, you know, in for this or up for this? Who knows? Who knows? You know, because there's really kind of, I mean, there's even a Republican argument for it. And we're going to be debating net neutrality at the top of the next hour. So I'll come back to that in 30 minutes. Dominic in Lamont, Illinois. Hey, Dominic, what's on your mind today? Dominic, listening on WCPT? Can you hear me? Dominic, I'm going to put you on hold. You need to listen to your phone and, well, that's interesting. I've got 2 Dominics, one on line 8 and one on line 7, and it says they're both listening to WCPT and they both want to talk about birds in Chicago.
Tom, hi.
Hey, Dominic.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Long time I haven't talked to you, but anyway, I've been listening. Your wife is still one of my biggest heroes, as well as you.
Well, thank you.
I wanted to let you know, we live in Lamont, and I have noticed we've owned the house. We've got about 1.5 acres of land. I've noticed, and we're in a forested area, and we live west of Argonne Labs, and it's forested. And Woodridge is to the northeast of, or northwest of us. It's also forest preserve there. And we're just north of the canal, which is also protected. Mm-hmm. I have noticed within the last 4 years something very strange, though. The trees here seem to be dying. And not just where we live, but like all over our area. I have noticed about half of the trees in the Chicagoland area as I'm driving every day with Uber, that they're all like half dead. I don't know what's going on with that.
Well, trees can't migrate. They can't move in response to climate change.
Yeah. So it's very odd, though, that they're all seemingly, the top halves are dying and the bottom halves are green, which is really weird. And then the birds, where we're at, we've actually been healthfully feeding the birds still even now. And the birds we've got have actually increased over the last couple of years. In fact, we've had hummingbirds solid for the last 4 years. And my wife noticed about 2 weeks ago we had a hummingbird already come to the house looking for food. Huh. So I just wanted you to know, at least here we're getting, and I'm getting some unusual birds now too. Goldfinches we never really had before, and orioles we never really had at our house before. But we still have the large birds. We've got about 25 varieties, but we've got hawks, falcons. It's really bizarre what we've got. We even have a groundhog that moved in a couple months back.
We used to have one of those. They love to eat echinacea. Yeah, don't plant echinacea. Your groundhog will eat it all.
Like 3 years, I just haven't bothered to call and pester you about what's going on. Yeah. But I'm still keeping tabs on what's going on with the political movement here and everything.
Sure.
I think in DuPage County, the Democratic Party seems to be getting much stronger over the last couple of years.
Good.
And I'm glad, I missed you when you came here to Chicago this past year downtown here. And I wish I could have seen you, but you were there while I had a client in the car, so I couldn't jump out and run over to see you.
Yeah, no, it's all good, Dominic. We'll be back. And thank you for the story about the birds. It's interesting. It's like what I'm hearing is that in some place, I mean, here in D.C., what we're noticing is, you know, a lack of them, and Seattle, we've got a surplus of them. You're seeing changes in them and changes in the trees. I think all of these are indications of a changing climate, whether it's catastrophic or simply different. That's the big question, and or even just, you know, catastrophic.
No, but I noticed the birds are being very voracious eaters as well, and that's very unusual for them as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've been putting out lots of suets, and I've actually got several bird feeders. I've had to relocate them because even raccoons started coming to our house trying to get food.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going on with the food sources themselves either. That seems to be a big issue
and that's
going on as well.
There's a dyssynchrony, apparently. You know, some insects, you know, that are, you know, have an evolutionary pattern that goes back hundreds of millions of years. Some insects are not changing the patterns of, you know, when they come out and when they don't. Whereas the birds are responding to the weather, or it's the other way around. The insects are responding to the weather, and the birds are responding to the sun. And the net effect is that the birds are showing up before or after the insects are available, at least the insect-eating birds, or the seed-eating birds in the case of those, you know, the finches and things. And it's like the cherry blossom festival here in D.C. You know, for out of the 7 years that we've lived here, I think only 1 year have there been cherry blossoms on the weekend that the cherry blossom festival happens, which was always when all the trees were in bloom. And now they're always in bloom, and the blooms are all gone, you know, 2 weeks early. And it happened again this year. So it's like, it's just, you know, things are changing. Things are changing. Dominic, thanks for your contribution. I appreciate the call. Doug in Hamul, California. Hey, Doug, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how you doing this morning?
Good. What's up?
You're really good, huh? That special prosecutor, I got to agree with Trump. This is the biggest witch hunt in the modern era of any politician we have seen. There is no probable cause for this special prosecutor. None. The only crime ever committed was the link of Flynn to the press, which Comey refused to investigate. There is clearly Hillary Clinton should have had a prosecutor, special prosecutor. Should have been, her evidence should have been done to a grand jury. Eric Holder lying under oath to the Congress. Obama lying to obstruction of justice during the Hillary Clinton investigation. This is all should have had a special prosecutor. This is just crazy.
Wow, you're sounding, Doug. This is these were the talking points from Fox News yesterday. You know, as you know, fairly well documented by Trevor Noah on the Daily Show, which is absolutely brilliant last night. How much time do you spend watching Fox News?
How much time do you listen to progressive propaganda? Just too much.
Well, probably too much, Doug. But I'm curious. This is an honest question. How much time do you spend watching Fox News?
Name the crime. Name Trump's crime. Name it.
Doug, how much time do you spend watching Fox News?
Name the crime. If you can't name the crime, there's shouldn't be a special prosecutor.
The crime that the special prosecutor is looking into is obstruction of justice. It's what Bill Clinton was charged with. It's what Richard Nixon was charged with. And if there is evidence of obstruction of justice, I suspect that Donald Trump will be charged with it. And I predict, and Doug, thanks a lot for the call. I'm sorry you wouldn't answer my question, but I think we can all figure it out, the answer. If Congress doesn't go along with this, I predict, and, you know, we'll see. My predictions aren't always right, but I predict that Donald Trump will resign and declare victory. He will do what George Aiken recommended LBJ should do with regard to the Vietnam War. You know, just bring the boys home and declare victory, right? But that Trump will be a martyr. I think I said this yesterday. In fact, you know, he'll be a martyr. He'll create a political movement around himself. He will resign. He will and Pence will become president. And there will be a well-funded movement to create monuments to, you know, sort of like the Ronald Reagan Legacy Project, to reinvent his history and make us all think he was just a wonderful guy and all this kind of stuff. We'll see. A lot of people want to talk about birds. That's fascinating. We'll be back with more of your calls after this. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls right after this. And welcome back. Justin in Bloomington, Indiana, watching Free Speech TV on Roku. Hey, Justin, what's up?
Yes, hi. I couldn't resist calling about the birds. I have lived in my house in Bloomington, Indiana. It's like south of Indianapolis. We're in the southern part of the state. And I've lived in my house 17 years. When I first moved here, my lilac bush in the spring would be absolutely covered with the yellow and black butterflies. And then one spring it came early, and so the lilac had bloomed when the butterflies showed up. And so the only thing that saved them was the fact that my yard is a varied environment. So one of my ground covers had flowers on it. I've got some of the birds that people are missing because I got a whole flock of rose-breasted grosbeaks this year, and I've gotten one like flying through before, and these, it looks like, stayed. And I haven't had summer tanagers except as fly-throughs. They're staying. I've got a pair.
So they're not migrating?
They're used to, they were migrating through here
Right.
on their way in the spring and then in the fall.
Right.
Now they've stayed.
Huh. Do you think that's because you're feeding them or because the weather's changing?
No, I think it's because the weather's changing. I'm surrounded kind of like by a forest and then a reservoir's on down from me, so it's a lot of water. My trees are dying. My homeowner's insurance, the deductible skyrocketed for anything related to like wind and storm damage.
Well, that's interesting. Well, that's the insurance companies all get it that the first consequence of global warming is more violent storms, and we're seeing
bees. The echinacea used to drip with bumblebees of every different size. I'm lucky if I see like one or two bumblebees all summer.
Wow.
And I haven't seen honeybees for like ever. And then about 3 years ago, they kind of showed up frantic at my hummingbird feeders. So there's some hive out in my forest that will come up now. But basically, I'm seeing this all over the place. And also living in Indiana, Mike Pence was our governor. And I think he's pretty much an amoral person. He lives off of revenue from like tobacco shops. And everybody I know here that's into Trump now originally was for Bernie.
Oh, So this is I saw the same thing here, and it's not that they're deep analysts of politics. They're just sick and tired of politics as usual.
Well, I mean, you have the billionaires owning the government,
right.
And that's why the change was necessary, right. And people were willing to vote for Trump,
right? Because he presented himself as an average guy who just happens to be a billionaire.
Well, at least he's not a billion. I mean, at least he looked like he was not going to go in and collaborate with everybody that was running everything.
Right, but then he did. And he brought all the billionaires into his cabinet.
I voted for Bernie.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And I'm disgusted with the Democratic Party, and so are my boys, who are like in their late 30s. When they basically did not go for Keith Ellison.
Well, get them inside the Democratic Party and change it. Justin, I got to run, but thank you for the call. And thanks for sharing your story about the birds. We'll be back. So the breaking news appears to be that Mike Pence, who on Fox News had said in March, well, this is the first that I heard that Mike Flynn was working for foreign governments. He'd taken some money from Russia to go to this RT event, but more consequentially, I think he had taken $500,000 from Turkey and suddenly was singing the praises of Erdogan, whose thugs were beating up American protesters here in Washington, D.C. yesterday. I retweeted that if you want to, see it and check it. But the New York Times is reporting that it was told to the transition team, which Mike Pence ran, back in January. So apparently in March, Mike Pence was lying to all of us. So is this gonna take out Trump and Pence? Who knows? Dave in Federal Way, Washington, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, not too much, Tom. I was thinking about your question about whether or not we're destroying the Earth with human-induced climate change.
Yeah.
And
among other things, actually, we're also producing toxins like crazy.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think that, destroying the Earth is a little bit heavy. I mean, the only mass extinction of insects was the Permian-Triassic extinction event. And so I don't think we're, going to end up destroying the Earth, but we're right in the middle of the Anthropocene extinction. And I think the climate change is just going to exacerbate it. And I'm almost certain it's going to eliminate human civilization as we recognize it.
Well, it certainly already has in the Middle East. I mean, you've got, Syria, Libya, Iraq. I mean, these were not, wonderful examples of Jeffersonian democracy, but they were stable countries that, Baghdad was referred to as the Paris of the Middle East. Several cities claimed that. Damascus was a beautiful city. People would love to visit, tourist attractions and things. Between George W. Bush's stupid war and the climate change that forced 1 million Syrian farmers off their farms because their farms turned to desert as the desert moved south. The same thing was happening in Libya. The same thing was happening in Egypt. And many would argue that climate change was the main driver of the so-called Arab Spring. It had nothing to do with politics, or in Tunisia it was happening as well. So yeah, and along with it, you get the rise of ISIS, and I don't think that you can call ISIS anything like civilization. And yeah, I don't disagree. I think that that's a very good analysis. Dave, thanks for the call and for making it. Kate in Chicago. Hey, Kate, what's up?
Hi there. I'm just calling to say that I live in the heart of Chicago, and one thing that I've noticed, because I've been feeding birds and walking amongst them, big fan, even of pigeons, that since West Nile happened, like, we have next to no crows anymore. We don't, and robins used to be so everywhere, and now they hardly see them. I mean,
does West Nile virus kill those birds? I thought they could be carriers for it, but I didn't think it killed them. Does it?
Well, what we were told is it took out 80% of the crow population here.
Whoa.
Yeah, and they did not recover.
Wow.
And I love crows. They're like incredible birds. They used to follow me around when I walked my dogs.
Yeah, they're super smart.
Yeah, and pigeons. I'm going to come back at you with the pigeons.
Yeah.
Can you name another species of bird that they're all different? None of them look the same. They're close, but the variety is incredible.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, I'm not gonna get into my pigeon robot theory here.
But I had to put it in there because
I know.
Have a good one.
Okay, thanks a lot. You too, Kate. Good to hear from you. Richard in Westchester, Pennsylvania. Hey, Richard, what's up?
Good afternoon, Tom. Rumor has it, in the spirit and reverence to President Harry Truman, Trump has a sign on his desk, but it's a little different. It says the buck starts here.
Ha! No, the buck goes here.
Well, he gets it going.
He's got a little piggy bank with a sign that says the buck goes here.
and you see, like, remember the Bay of Pigs?
Yeah.
Before Kennedy came into office, he had nothing to do with it.
He didn't even know about it until about 2 weeks before they pulled the trigger on it. Yeah.
Right. And when it failed, he stood up and said, "I take full responsibility." Yep. Could you picture Donald doing that?
No. No.
That's hysterical.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And really, that's not so much a testimonial to what a brilliant man Jack Kennedy was, although he was, but by taking responsibility for what happened on his watch, he was just doing the normal, responsible adult thing. The fact that Donald Trump is incapable of that is a comment, much more of a comment on Donald Trump than on Jack Kennedy, I think. Richard well said. Thank you for the call. Margaret in Aberdeen, Washington. Hey, Margaret, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hello, Tom. Thank you again. Yes, my topic was about the birds. And I do live on very close, within 5 miles of the Pacific Flyway, where all the birds from South America are coming up, and that's their rest stop. That's where they stay. It's a beautiful wildlife refuge. And then all the birds coming back from the south, they stop there twice a year. Thousands of wonderful migratory birds. And I am worried about, of course, the climate change. But the biggest thing I'm worried about is they are trying to bring the Dakota back on oil to the port, which is directly next to this wildlife refuge.
Oh, my.
And that's what we've been fighting. We finally got the environmental impact statement to be done. So we blocked it for a while, but we don't know what is next. I mean, that is the rest stop for all these beautiful birds. Yeah. And the only
one bad oil spill, and you got a real problem for a couple of years.
Yes. And the only thing I can do personally, I have 5 raised beds where I live, and I try to attract the birds, the butterflies, and the bumblebees, the bees, because they're the great pollinators. And if we don't have those pollinators, that's going to be detrimental to the farms and just world hunger.
Yeah.
So that was just my thought. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure. Thank you, Margaret. Thanks for the call. How are we doing on time, Troy? A little more than a minute. Okay, Joan in Otto, North Carolina. You have about a minute. What's up?
Oh, hi. I'm a first-time caller to any program like this, so I'm nervous.
Well, thank you, Joan.
Yesterday on your program, you discussed the movement to get money out of politics, and you were talking about the states that have gotten a resolution. North Carolina, where I live, wants to be the 19th state to have a ballot measure passed. Earlier this year, House Bill 453 and Senate Bill 354 were introduced for the purpose of creating a statewide ballot measure in our 2018 general election. But we need not only the legislators on board, but we need everyone listening in North Carolina to go to our website and sign the petition. Would it be all right for me to give you our website?
If you're certain that this is one of the efforts to send an amendment that says corporations aren't people and money's not speech, rather than the right-wing effort, which now has over a dozen states signed up to create a constitutional convention. Go for it.
Yes. We declaring that...
no, Joan, you just got 10 seconds. Give us the URL.
Okay, it's ncwethepeople.org.
Great. NC, like North Carolina, wethepeople.org. Thank you, Joan. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by EcoWine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, EcoWine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Prophet's Way, A Guide to Living in the Now, which is largely my autobiography, essentially, a spiritual autobiography. This is from page 68, the chapter Changing the World by Changing Ourselves. The summer I lived in a teepee, I thought a great deal about the monastic experience. I'd read Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross and several books by Thomas Merton, and throughout my life had been drawn to the idea of solitude as a way of speeding up spiritual experience and growth. And that had certainly been my experience in my semi-monastic summer. I received knowledge and insights that I doubt I could have gotten any other way. Before I went into the forest and lived in that teepee, I'd always considered the monastic experience to be both intensely personal and intensely selfish. A monk, I thought, was a person working on himself and only affecting him or herself. But that summer, I realized that my spiritual practice was having an effect on the world. I could feel it. It was as if the world itself had a particular vibration made up of the buzz of all the life upon and within it. And when I was peaceful, it made the world a bit more peaceful. When I was agitated, the world became more agitated. My conclusion from this admittedly subjective experience was that I really was affecting the world, that monks are spiritual warriors and that monasteries are places from which powerful beams of positive spiritual energy fan out from the men and women in them to transform and help the world. While not so common among the writings of contemporary monks, this view was clearly held by those people who chose the monastic life in the centuries and millennia preceding the last 100 years or so. And so I worked at making myself more pure so I could add purity to the world. But throughout this, there was also part of me that thought that this was a subjective experience, perhaps with no objective reality. It seemed on that level that it wasn't possible that I could be so closely connected to the world, that I could have any significant impact on it just by my state of being at any particular moment or throughout my life. Because it was me experiencing the world, then of course the world would change as I changed. My point of view is shifting or being contaminated by my own mental state at the moment. This assumption was the result of my training in science. Science is something unique to those cultures who were influenced by the Greeks or the Persians. In India, Chinese, and Native American cultures, there is no equivalent. They have philosophy and spirituality, which integrate what we call science with what we call mysticism. But in their classic traditions, they don't have what we would refer to as pure science. Two of the primary tenets of science are the things that things are ultimately divisible into tiny, definable building blocks, and then for there to be a true reality, the observer must be separate from the observed. In our dreams, we're both observer and observed. It's unreal. In daily life, we're the observer, and the things around us, separate from us, are the observed. So we think of them as real. In this worldview, the entire universe can be separated into pieces, the first and primary division being that of observer and observed, subjective and objective. Science believed, and Aristotle and Descartes and others taught, that if the subjective observer could rid himself of his personal and instrumentational subjectivity and identify all the relevant factors, then a truly objective truth about the world and reality could be seen, measured, and determined. This belief, accepted as an absolute truth and the underpinning of our modern culture, led to viewing humankind as separate from the natural world. The classic question, if a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody there to hear it as a sound made, assumes that nobody there to hear it means a human. Only humans, so the story went, were capable of classifying and separating things, breaking them into pieces, as Aristotle taught us, and understanding their separate meanings. Only humans would recognize sound as sound. But as science divided matter into smaller and smaller pieces, a disturbing trend began to emerge. It was found that supposedly inanimate matter seemed to be affected by the act of observing. The first response to this was Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which stated that things were constantly in a state of flux. And so if anything were observed at any moment, by the time the observation itself was made, things had already changed. Therefore, it was impossible to ever truly and absolutely observe anything. Because by the time we'd registered the observation, by the time the photons of light had hit the retina of our eye, the thing we were observing had already changed. It was also noted that the act of observing was not purely passive. With an electron microscope, for example, electrons are bounced off of or passed through things to produce an image for viewing. Similarly, a conventional microscope only works when photons of light bounce off the specimen and into your eye. Light and electrons are bits of matter or energy that could have a demonstrable effect on the things being observed, further increasing the certainty of the accuracy of the observation. Heisenberg went so far as to say that the exact location of anything in time and space could never be known, regardless of method or instrumentation. So it seemed we really couldn't know anything as an absolute and real state. All we could do is engineering, working with things because they work, like electricity, even though we don't know how or why they work, which is in fact the case with electricity. This allows us to manipulate the world around us, to build machines and make things work, but it also leads to the dangerous assumption that to be able to use something is to know it. This is mirrored in human nature, too. We're constantly affected by our experience of life, and our experiences change our personality, our worldview, and our behaviors. And I'm not now the person I was before I met Herr Mueller, nor am I now the same person I was even a week ago or even 1 minute ago. We grow, change, and are constantly in a state of flux, and this provides us with an opportunity to develop the spiritual sides of ourselves, and by doing this, to make the entire planet more spiritual. So this aspect of the scientific approach turned out to be wrong. It was in fact not possible to separate the observer from the observed. The book is The Prophet's Way.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with me. On the line with us is Tom Giovanetti. He is the president of the Institute for Policy Innovation. IPI.org is the website, a group dedicated to ending net neutrality. You can tweet him at Giovanetti. Tom, welcome to the program. And am I accurately characterizing your group?
Well, we do other issues besides net neutrality, Tom, but that's pretty close.
Okay. All right. So
Sure.
In China, they don't have net neutrality. The government censors things that they don't like. And in Canada, they declared, in fact, the Canadian legislature a month and a half ago declared net neutrality to be a basic human right. Net neutrality is the law in all of the advanced countries of Western Europe. Here's what I don't understand. Why would you want to turn our internet over to giant ISPs like Comcast, who owns NBC, when then Comcast could easily say, if you're a Comcast subscriber, and you know, there is a certain amount of, this is a natural monopoly, because how many pieces of copper do you have coming into your house, right? You're a Comcast subscriber, and Comcast says, you know, we really want to promote NBC and MSNBC, so we're going to slow down Fox News, or we're going to make it so it gets really hard for you to get to Fox News' websites. Doesn't that concern you, corporate control of the internet, having giant corporations do to our internet the same thing China does, only for money purposes rather than political purposes?
Well, Tom, you've done a fabulous job of setting up sort of a very skewed description of the situation.
What is inaccurate about what I just said?
Well, you start off talking about communist China for one thing. Look.
Well, you're talking about fascist Comcast. I mean, you know, if you define fascism as the merger of corporate and state interests, you've got, you know, the corporations that you're aligning yourself with, trying to influence our government to increase the profits for the corporations. How is that any different?
Tom, the first thing is that there's a difference between net neutrality and the FCC's Title II regulations. In fact, the truth of the matter is almost all the ISPs at this point have said that they agree to net neutrality in principle. Now, that is a change from some of their previous positions, I'll acknowledge. But
the pharmaceutical companies 20 years ago said, we'll never rip you off if you give us extended patent protection. Don't worry. And the health insurance companies, I just so trust these giant corporations, Tom. I really do.
Let's talk about the last 20 years, Tom. The internet has rolled out from nothing to a fabulous benefit to society in that 20 years. And in that 20 years, these heavy-handed Title II regulations were not in place. So I think if someone's going to argue that these heavy-handed Title II regulations are a necessity, if someone's going to argue that they're important, you've got a serious burden of proof problem, because they have not been necessary or important for the internet to roll out and become such an important part of people's life. The truth is, the majority of people recognize that light touch regulation is the appropriate approach for the government. If there's a problem, if an ISP is blocking, if somebody's acting in a way that
like Comcast was doing last year?
Look, if a company is acting in a way that is contrary to the public interest, then the FTC and the FCC have the power to step in.
No, I get it. You want it to go to the FTC because they don't have anything close to the power that the FCC has, number one. And number two, you know, I consider this complete BS, Tom, frankly. I mean, you know, respectfully, heavy-handed regulations. I mean, have you been talking to Frank Luntz?
Tom, I knew that before I came on your show.
So let's talk about these heavy-handed regulations. What Title II says, it's the common carrier status. And it goes back to 1924. This has to do with telephony, with telephone services, so that Gladys, who used to connect you, you know, on the switchboard, you want to call your neighbor, you call the operator, and she pulls the plug out and puts it in. And so that Gladys, if she's listening in, decides, hey, Tom's having an affair with a woman down the street, I'm going to pull a plug on him. Right.
So let's apply those regulations to the internet.
The whole thing was you can't. Let me finish my sentence, and I'll give you all the time you want, Tom, or not all of it, but you know, within reason. But so basically, what we said was to the phone companies, you can't say, because you can't listen in on somebody's conversation and then based on their conversation alter your behavior. In other words, Gladys can't disconnect you because she thinks you're having an affair with the woman down the street, or she can't, or the phone company can't charge you extra because they discover that on your phone call you're making a multi-million-dollar business deal and you're a rich guy. They can't do that. They have to treat all phone calls equally, right? That is common carrier status. That is Title II. That's what's been applied to the internet. Why would you want to say that it's okay for a giant ISP like Comcast to say, oh, gee, let's get rid of these heavy-handed regulations, and with light touch regulations, let us slow down Fox News, let us slow down all the conservative websites, let us, in fact, block the conservative websites unless you want to pay extra. You know about the tiered pricing. You know that these companies rolled this out 4 years ago as a proposal. Comcast was right at the front of this, of tiered price, you know, $15 basic internet. Oh, you want news sites, another $5. You want porn sites, another $20. You want streaming video, another $15. You know, it's the cable TV model. This is what these guys are salivating over. I frankly am not so concerned about their censorship, although this opens the door for that. But basically, it's just another way to rip us off, which is why they're spending so much money to promote stuff like, you know, what you're doing right now. Okay, your turn.
You know, you give me an awful lot to respond to, Tom, but I really want to make sort of a 30,000-foot point, and that is the assumption behind all of your rhetoric is that the way corporations get rich is by abusing their customers, by limiting their choices, by punishing them, and by forcing them to do things they don't want to do.
That is absolutely true when they achieve monopoly status, which is where these companies are at right now. And you know that.
Tom, is that there's no evidence for that.
Oh, yeah? Google Comcast customer service.
Tom, the burden of proof is on the person who wants to argue that these regulations are necessary. And if they were necessary, then why have they not been necessary for the last 20 years while the internet rolled out and became, frankly, a beloved and fabulous source of information and content for people?
Because during most of that 20 years, you did not have essentially a monopoly among 4 or 5 massive ISPs. I was running forums on CompuServe in the late 70s and early 80s when all the entire internet was CompuServe and AOL. You know, Nigel, Sue, and I did this, you know, for 10, 15 years. We made a really good living at it. And then the internet came along.
I was on CompuServe myself for many years.
Right. And then the internet came along and wiped us out. But it used to be that you could choose any ISP you wanted because they were all coming over your phone service. You had a 1200 baud modem. We started out with 300 baud modems, in fact. 2400 baud modem, major innovation, but it was all over the phone service. So you had over 100 ISPs, major national ISPs, who were competing with each other that all came through the same copper into your home. That's the law in Europe. Any ISP that provides copper has to rent that copper at cost plus a small profit to any ISP that they want, which is why in France you can buy internet service that is 5 times faster than the United States, which includes cell phone service and telephone service to all of Europe for about $25 a month. because there's over 150 major ISPs in France who are all competing with each other, even though only 3 of them own most of the copper and the fiber. The companies that you're representing and that you're advocating for have fought tooth and nail the ability to have companies do that. When I lived in Vermont, Vermont actually passed a law allowing for that. And then Verizon came in and lobbied the legislature, and they repealed the law the next year. I mean, this is fundamentally anti-competitive. And yes, your characterization of my characterization of these companies as wanting to rip us off and behave like blood-sucking leeches when they hit the monopoly phase, and I defy you to tell me any industry that this is not true of, when they hit the monopoly phase, that's exactly what happens.
Tom, we have a wealth of laws and regulations. They're called antitrust, and they're designed to deal with monopolistic
And Reagan
behavior.
stopped enforcing them in 1982, and that led to the M&A mania. It led to Michael Milken, and it has not been replaced.
If a company starts behaving in a monopolistic way, there is an antitrust division at the Department of Justice that is more than adequate to step up to that.
The antitrust division at the Department of Justice is a joke.
When you hold up Europe as an example of the ideal policies, Tom, I want to remind you, where is all the innovation taking place? The innovation
Skype was invented in Estonia, as I recall.
If you want to live in a highly regulated consumer market where corporations are heavily regulated, you have a great example of that in Europe. Meanwhile,
and the quality of life is much better than the United States.
I
lived in Europe for a year.
Europe is desperately jealous of our innovation economy. They hold conferences on how can we compete? How can we step up? How can we start innovating like the United States?
No, actually, Europe is looking at, and you know this, Tom, Europe is looking at Apple and Microsoft in particular right now and going, these guys are behaving like monopolists. They are locking out innovation. Monopoly stops innovation. Doing away with net neutrality will kill innovation.
Because Europe is incoherent on innovation policy. On the one hand, they say, oh, we wish we had innovation like the U.S., but they cannot help to do the kind of policies that you advocate, which is heavy regulation.
This is simply not true, Tom. It's simply not true. I spent last week in Germany and Norway interviewing scientists with a film crew. They're doing some of the most amazingly innovative stuff, particularly in the area of solar and wind energy and all that kind of stuff. But this isn't about Europe. This is about a small handful of very wealthy, politically connected companies who are buying politicians left and right who want to lock down our internet. And I don't understand why you would support that.
Because nobody wants to lock down the internet. Your assumption is absolutely false.
Then why can't I start an ISP and offer services to you, even if you have Comcast coming into your house? Comcast won't let it happen, right?
Let me give you an example.
The law provides for it. The law allows it. Why won't Comcast let me start an ISP and provide service over their copper to your house?
Because they own their copper, Tom, because we have something in this country called property rights. They made those investments.
That is a natural monopoly. Actually, in many cases, they didn't make those investments, and those investments go through the commons. They go under our roads. This is part of our common infrastructure.
It is not common infrastructure, Tom. The internet is predominantly
the internet is the new public library.
The internet is predominantly made up of privately owned networks who have agreed to interchange traffic, and it is a beautiful example of free markets.
You are exactly answering your own question, Tom, of why was it that 20 years ago there was no problem and now we've got a problem. 20 years ago, there were hundreds of ISPs. 20 years ago, there was lots of competition. Now you've got AT&T trying to merge with Time Warner so that they can compete with Comcast, so we can end up with, 2-3 giant ISPs.
Tom, there is no problem right now. You are imagining it and you are fearing it. You're scared.
You're absolutely right. I am imagining it, and well, actually, no, I'm not imagining it. Comcast has slowed traffic. You try running a VPN through your Comcast, they will throttle you, or at least they do to me here in Washington, D.C. Anyhow, Tom Giovanni, president of the Institute for Policy Innovation, IPI.org. Hang on just a second, Tom.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
You can tweet him at TGIOVANETTI or at IPI. Tom, thank you for being with us. And my apologies for mangling your name.
It was great fun.
Thank you. And welcome back. Nathaniel in Sacramento, California. Hey, Nathaniel, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Oh, hello, Tom. This is my first time calling. I'm only 18, but my father likes your show so much. And I'm going back to the topic of climate change. And I was just talking to my brother, and I was saying, yeah, humans are kind of to blame for the climate change. But when you think about it, in history, we are kind of like the youngest species on the planet right now. Only 2,000 years old.
Yeah, 200,000 years old, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that's also partly to blame because our planet is kind of getting used to our adaptation.
Yeah, we're the new invasive species.
Yeah, instead of like most of the planet, most of the species who adapt to their environment, humans have, our intellect allows us to adapt our environment to us.
Correct.
That's why we have all these worlds of roads and buildings, and like I hate it. I hate to think about it, but like, what is the world going to look like 100 years from now?
Well, a lot depends on the decisions we make right now, Nathaniel, and a lot of that is going to depend on whether or not people like you who care about these things decide to get politically active.
And I also think about that, like we naturally divide ourselves. That's how all species work. They stay like to their own, like primates, they have their own packs. Dogs, they have their own packs, and they don't get unified as conglomerates like humans do. We have like so many people that just live together, and we just take up so much space, so much more than we deserve.
In other words, humans are competing with other species, and well, human biomass in, I think it was 1993, outpaced or surpassed termites as the largest single species mass of biomass on the planet. And at that point, we were only 6.5 billion people.
And also, like our like how all species they're supposed to survive. Like, they're supposed to survive just for their offspring, but people are living longer, and we have all this overpopulation. So I feel like that's like a lot of the stuff is just going to turn into a wildfire. And I feel like, I wanted to ask you, do you feel like humans are endangering themselves more than they're endangering the planet?
Yes, I do. Well, I think it's both. I mean, we're seeing a massive die-off. We are in the middle of the sixth extinction. We're seeing a massive die-off of other species. We're also seeing radical explosion of problems with humans, and that I believe are the result of our own, producing a toxic environment, from, explosions in neurological diseases at birth, the autism spectrum stuff and things like that, to an explosion of obesity and cancers and diabetes, other metabolic diseases that are not, a normal part of our history. They're typically the abnorm. Now they're becoming the norm. I'm very concerned about it. By the way, humans are not living longer. The numbers look better because we've reduced infant mortality, but actually the bottom 90% of Americans economically, their lifespans have decreased for all races, have decreased over the last 30 years rather than increased. It's only the top 10% who are living longer as adults. But the average age, if you take out infant mortality, really hasn't changed that much, since the advent of penicillin. And if you take out infectious diseases, hasn't changed that much since the 17th century. Anyhow, Nathaniel, I got to move along, but thank you for the call, and thank you for being a young activist. Good on you. And I wish you the very best. We'll be right back.
Hi there, I'm Marie with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving donations, volunteering, or spreading the word about Free Speech TV, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to exist. And for that, I want to say thank you. Now you can give to the network powered by the people by donating an unwanted or used vehicle through our Vehicles of Change program. If you have an old car, RV, or even a motorcycle, Free Speech TV can use it to grow and thrive. You can make a bigger difference in supporting Free Speech TV by giving an old car. It's a great way to support the network without having to dig into your bank account. Just call 877-378-8669 and ask for more information about Vehicles of Change. Again, the number to call is 877-378-8669. If it has a VIN, we'll take it in. Thank you.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Scott in Missoula, Montana. Hey, Scott, you wanted to talk about the internet?
Yes, sir. Like you, I was involved in the internet back when it was a 300 baud scenario, and I was a systems engineer for a startup and ended up working for Cisco and was involved in that whole era of development and innovation. And the reason it evolved so quickly was because there were regulations in place, one in particular that allowed CLECs, which are competitive local exchange carriers, to use the media, the copper that all the traditional phone companies had to deliver services on. And this allowed them to go to companies like Cisco and people like me to innovate and say, all right, well, how can we get high-speed communications over this?
Right.
So it's regulations that allowed the innovation of the internet, and it's just
well, and not only that, if I may, Scott, the original internet was all these interconnections. First of all, DARPA, the defense program, but then the universities also kind of got into this thing, and that infrastructure was all built and paid for by the government. I mean, basically, it's been expanded by private corporations as we've privatized more and more of the internet. But the internet was invented by the government. Yes, Al Gore actually did sign that legislation.
That's right. You are exactly right. And the first email address I had was at Florida State University as one of the first email addresses in Tallahassee there. But so you're right. As these big companies have taken over and the monopolies are developing, that's going to stifle innovation without regulation. We absolutely have to have that. And as soon as we lose net neutrality, it's all over.
I think so too. I think I think we're looking. I mean, when you look at our television media landscape right now, it's like this vast wasteland. I mean, there's a half a dozen companies who own the 200 channels that you'll find on most cable companies, most cable setups, and they're all it's all pablum. It's really hard to find meaningful programming, and some of it is moving to the internet, and so of course the companies that control your cable TV, they also want to be. I mean, Time Warner is a giant one. They want to merge with AT&T, which is an ISP. You've got Comcast, with NBC Universal and MSNBC, and and they're also, I think, about 30% of American households now use Comcast. You've got these giant ISPs. They want to turn the internet into a tiered and rated and ranked system like you find on cable, and it's it'll be much more profitable. Go ahead.
And I don't understand how your guest, who you and I both know that he understands this, how can he be so disingenuous as to say that there is no monopoly environment right now? He knows that there is.
Yeah, I think we have. Well, assuming some level of honesty on his part, I think we just have different definitions of what a monopoly is. But Scott, spot on. Thanks a lot for the call and for adding to the conversation, for contributing to the conversation. Appreciate it. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of the news of the day, your calls, and my thoughts right after this.
Hi, it's the Thom Hartmann Book Club with the Thom Hartmann University, and today we're reading from Threshold, the progressive plan to pull America back from the brink. I'm reading from the preface. This is page XIII. The world right now is tottering atop three major thresholds. An environment, that is so afire that it may soon no longer be able to support human life. An economic free market system that is almost entirely owned, run, and milked by a tiny fraction of 1% of us and has crashed and in many ways is burning around us. And an explosion of human flesh on the planet that has turned our species into a global petri dish just waiting for an effective agent to run amok. 4 mistakes have brought us to this point, and the failure to recognize them at their deepest level will only push us faster toward total tipping points, where we are thrown over the 3 thresholds and into disaster. All four of these mistakes are grounded in our culture, our way of thinking, our way of seeing the world, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and why we're here. The first mistake is a belief that we're separate from nature. Our religions tell us that we were created by a supernatural being who is not part of this earth and not from this planet. He set us apart from all other life, and many among us, perhaps even the majority of the 6 billion of us, roughly 7 billion now, don't even believe that we are animals, but instead think we're a totally unique life form. The second mistake is a belief that an abstraction, an economic system, is divine and separate from us. This mythical so-called free market, so we believe, operates under its own divine rules and is entirely and eternally self-regulating. It is always right. The fact that worldwide it's more than 95% owned and run by fewer than 0.0000001% of us, it's just the way things are, always were, and always will be. We are here to serve the economy, this belief goes. It's not here to serve us. The third mistake is a belief that men should run the world and that women are their property. While it may seem that women's rights are well advanced and society is nearly egalitarian in the developed world, the United States, Western Europe, and Australia combined are only about a quarter of the population of the world. In India, it's still a common rural practice for men to burn their wives to death simply because it's more convenient than divorce. In many Arab countries and across much of Africa and South America, it's not uncommon for women to be murdered by their families if they dishonor the family by not going along with an arranged marriage or not being a virgin at time of marriage. Even in the first world, women are routinely excluded from positions of power in the world's largest institutions, such as the Catholic Church. This is one of our biggest mistakes, not just because it's morally deficient or because it can be biologically challenged, but because its primary result is an explosion in population. The fourth mistake is a belief that the best way to influence people is through fear rather than through the power of love, compassion, or support. We stand baffled when Palestinians in Gaza vote for a political party that has a long history of terrorist activity, somehow completely overlooking the fact that that same group has been feeding people, building schools and hospitals, and providing old age and widow pensions to people in need. We think we can threaten and bomb people into liking us and behaving in ways consistent with our best interests while ignoring their own best interests. We have come to believe that we are not our brother's keeper, that we are separate from all other humanity on the planet, and in all that, we are mistaken. Civilizations have come and gone, and those long gone vanished mostly because they despoiled their commons, allowed small elites to control their economies and governments, and lived in ways that were unsustainable. Those who survive for centuries or millennia are the ones that learned how to protect their commons, engage in non-toxic commerce and governance, and organize their cultures and lifestyles in ways that could continue in the same place and the same way down through the ages. If we don't learn the lessons of the latter, we shall face the fate of the former. And just a little bit from the first chapter. This is titled Darfur, and on the border with Darfur, Sudan, March 16th, 2008. It's late morning, and I'm sitting on the dirt ground typing it into an old AA battery-operated pocket word processor, a Zorus ZR5000, in part because the nearest electricity is over 500 miles away. So is the nearest paved road and the nearest building made with anything other than mud or grass. This is Gok Machar, southern Sudan, just a few miles from the border with Darfur, a village that's swelled from 8,000 people to more than 45,000 as refugees flee the bombings and murders take place as I type these words just 50 miles to the northwest. About 300 people arrived just this morning, most with nothing more than the clothes they were wearing, many with stories of relatives who died along the way as they fled or before the UN could transport them here. When we first arrived on the African continent, we looked out onto the nighttime savannah beyond our Nairobi hotel, and it was truly a startling sight, one I'd almost forgotten since my last visit to Kenya back in 1982. The landscape is huge, horizon to horizon, like the movies you see of these parts of Africa. The land here in South Sudan is vast, is just as vast and flat. The 45,000 people around me share one single hand-pumped well, drilled a decade ago by the UN, and no other infrastructure beyond that. No buildings, no roads, no septic tank or sewage system, no schools, no clinics, no hospitals, no stores, or even storehouses. Nothing. The book is Threshold, the progressive plan to pull America back from the brink.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Carl in Vernon Hills, Illinois. Hey, Carl, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, it's good to talk to you. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Just wanted to give you a heads up. I don't know if you saw last week with John Oliver. He has a website set up to make a comment to the FCC about net neutrality. So you don't have to go through the whole process of putting in the...
Right. Can you remind me what the URL is for that?
Go FCC yourself.
.com? Right. Go FCCyourself.com. Got it.
Correct, but it's not available right now because they have some kind of a quiet period before they vote. Maybe open today.
No, the vote already happened. They voted this morning to say no to net neutrality, but that doesn't kill it. It just starts the process of killing it.
I know they were flooded with calls last week, and hopefully this will get that out to everybody and start doing it.
I think they don't care. I think Ajit Pai is just, looking at the $1 million plus paychecks he's going to get when he leaves the FCC and goes to work for the telecom industry.
Oh, we just
personal opinion, but
changed it before, so hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we certainly did change Tom Wheeler's mind, and Tom Wheeler used to be a lobbyist for the telecom industry and came in and was opposed to net neutrality. He was the one who put everything under Title II. After actually the Supreme Court said, if you want to do this, this is the only way to do it. And so that's what he did. And so now the sales pitch from these giant ISP companies and the front groups that they fund is, oh, well, let's have the Federal Trade Commission regulate it. Well, the Federal Trade Commission can slap your hand if you're defrauding consumers, but they can't regulate something like the internet. It's incredible. Carl, thanks for the call. Well said. Anna in DeKalb, Illinois, listening to WCPT. Hey, Anna, what's up?
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
So I actually am really interested in this whole internet monopoly. I completely agree with you with your beliefs on that. Specifically in our area, we have Comcast, and I was actually having a conversation with a friend about this last night about how she can't find any other service providers because Comcast has essentially taken over the area and not allowing for any other, types of internet or even cable, being able to be offered there. I come from a family that actually runs their own cable and internet business, just a small family, business. And we thankfully have found an area, just super small towns, that, Comcast won't touch. It's just not worth it for them. But I also have a comment about your guest who is on and his idea about how if they paid, if specifically, like I said, in Comcast in our area, is paying for the copper to be put in our area, per se, then they should be able to use that. So I was wondering, I had understood about your discussion about Europe and how I think you said France, that they're allowing any ISPs to be able to use that specific copper. Now, in the instance of here...
Well, it's not just use it, if I may, Anna, just to be very, very clear. It's that if you want your ISP to go over another ISP's copper, you have to pay them cost plus a small profit. So nobody's losing money on this. But it does allow for competition because the copper, it's like you've got one electric line coming into your house, you got one water line coming into your house, you got one septic line coming into your house, and for most people you've got one internet line, and typically it's the same thing as your cable TV line coming into your house. These are natural monopolies, and natural monopolies, because typically you only have one coming into your home, natural monopolies need to be regulated because they have got you by the throat. It's a monopoly. You don't have a choice. Back to you, Anna.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And that, like I said, I was just trying to clarify. So I completely agree with that. And so I have a question just clarifying, is it an issue that, say, these bigger companies are not allowing for that, and so that's why we're trying to lobby for the government to regulate that? Is that what this whole, issue is about, that the monopolies are not letting others do the profit plus, percentage or whatever?
It used to be, and there were a lot of, small ISP companies, and you're familiar with this, your family's done this business. Used to be that the local ISP companies had to allow other ISPs to run over their copper and pay them a fee plus a profit. Those laws were changed state by state mostly. Like I said, I lived in Vermont when it actually happened. We had a company called Sovernet, which I think still exists, that was offering both telephone service and internet service provider and ISP over Verizon's copper into our home in Montpelier, Vermont. And the legislature passed a law saying that Verizon had to make that copper available to those people at a cost-plus basis, so they didn't lose money. And then the next year, they got lobbied and they changed it so Verizon can offer that, right? Not must. And all of a sudden, Verizon just started saying, well, we're going to choose not to. And I believe that the state of the law right now is that they can, not that they must. I know it's not that they must, but that they can, but none of them are choosing to the best of my knowledge.
Well, in that instance, I mean, that's what this whole issue is, right? That these monopolies are if they have a choice, that they're not going to do it. And so then there's no other chances at all for that.
Right. They bought all the houses on Boardwalk or whatever. It's been too long since I played Monopoly, but they basically bought the whole block, right? And they control it, and they're not letting go of it. And I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Very well said. Jill in Kingston, Washington. Hey, Jill, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking the call. I was just wanting to know what your past, your guest, what his contact was with reality. I canceled my cable subscription back in July due to their coverage of the news. And what happened was I went to Amazon Fire TV. Fabulous service, I must say. And at the time, I kept my wireless internet connection with Comcast, them being the only game in town around here. And it was working fine. They've come out with a new service that amps up your wireless. And the funny thing is all of a sudden, my Fire TV doesn't work so well. So I think they're already doing it.
Yeah.
I think they're already slowing it down in anticipation of this new legislation.
Yeah. I can't speak to that, but, nothing would surprise me. Nothing would surprise me. I can tell you, and this was a couple of years ago. It's been a while since I've tried this experiment. But, we used to, we've now built an internet here, intranet within our radio and TV studio. But we used to pass big video files back and forth by Dropbox and stuff like that. And I had Comcast. And what I discovered was that if I was paying for, I think, 20 MIPS down and 5 MIPS up, just, consumer Comcast. Maybe it was 30 MIPS up, whatever it was, or down rather. And what I noticed is that when I was bringing the files in normally, they would come in at 20 MIPS, but after maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes, if it was a really large file, a long file, it would start to slow down, like they're saying, okay, we're going to start throttling you. So I tried going to a VPN, a virtual private network, so that they could not see my traffic, so that they didn't know what it was I was transmitting, or they didn't know how big the file size was going to be, so they wouldn't know when to cut me down or off, things like that. And immediately it throttled me to 5 MIPS, immediately, as soon as it detected the VPN. And so the VPN company then came out with a product that they said would prevent your ISP from knowing that you were using a VPN. And when I used that product, then it took about a half hour before they start throttling me. But, I saw this and, myself. And so,
well,
yeah.
I've been thinking about, getting a VPN, my own VPN service.
Yeah.
Just for the privacy issues.
Yeah, yeah, because this is another thing that these giant internet companies want, these ISPs, is you do away with net neutrality. They get to do deep packet inspection. They can look at absolutely everything you're doing and use it to market to you, use it to, whatever they choose. If you're a gadfly, they can probably use it to really mess with you. Who knows?
Right.
So, yeah.
It's very concerning, Tom, and I'm not willing to pay them a nickel more because this new enhanced, wireless internet. No, I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Well, the problem is, you don't have a lot of choices. I mean, that's the problem, and because nobody has enforced our antitrust laws since Jimmy Carter broke up AT&T, and that was initiated by Richard Nixon. And then, you know, after Carter came Reagan, and Reagan stopped enforcing the rules, and we had the M&A, the mergers and acquisitions mania, and here we are.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And now these very problems that we're talking about relative to net neutrality are happening in literally every major industry in the United States. Monopolization by a small handful of companies. And welcome back. Art in Tallahassee, Florida, watching Free Speech TV on Roku. Hey, Art, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing? Love your show.
Thank you.
Just wanted to comment about the climate change and nature observations you've been talking about. Yeah, here in Tallahassee, I used to see banana spiders, and they used to be everywhere. Used to be around the house, and I run through trails a lot, and I would see them in the trees. And they're pretty big spiders, and they look pretty, you know, just nice spiders to check out from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't seen them in several years now.
Oh, really?
Really. And I'm also worried about our pine trees. And I don't know if this is something that am I inventing this issue? It just seems like they're not doing well. We had a big storm back in the fall that brought down a bunch of trees around the city.
Right.
And as I just drive around and, you know, as I've thought about it more, I've kind of been observing more. And I just see more trees that are leaning, more trees that are down randomly.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with I'm not familiar with the geohydraulics of Tallahassee specifically, but large parts of Florida are suffering from inflow of salt water as a consequence of pumping out the freshwater aquifers, and the soil is so porous, or relatively, I mean, it's sedimentary rock in most places, or old seashells. Do you think that could be it? That your trees are being poisoned by the salinity, increasing salinity of the groundwater?
That is a new issue that I haven't, really heard about or explored at all. But possibly, and it makes me wonder if I should be watering my trees.
Yeah, possibly. Although, it could be the lower levels of the roots. I mean, one of the ways to tell is your lowest, your highest and most outer leaves are the ones that are from the newest and most surface, I believe, roots. And the lower leaves represent the roots that have gone deeper and deeper and deeper. Although I could be wrong on that. Probably an arborist will call me up and tell me I'm crazy on this. But there is a relationship, though, between where the leaves are and where the roots are. And a good tree guy can tell you, or gal can tell you, okay, that brown spot on the canopy of the tree means that this spot on the ground probably has something going on where it's damaging the roots. And so it's an interesting thing. But basically, you're seeing these changes. Are the banana spiders? Do you think that they're like spiders are food for birds, right?
I imagine so.
So might this be? Are we looking at the food web here vanishing?
Possibly. I mean, I just think there's going to be all kinds of repercussions from climate change that, we can't necessarily anticipate. And maybe this is just, one of them in the web of things that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I am very concerned about the web of life. We are. This is the problem with Cartesian thinking, believing that we're not part of the web of life, that we stand apart from it and are superior to it. And we are absolutely part of it and subordinate to it, not superior to it. Art, thank you for the call. Thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV on Roku. We'll be back with Victoria Jones with Talk Media News right after this. Welcome back. Let's check in with Victoria Jones with Talk Media News. This report brought to you by GoatsForTheOldGoat.com and Loving What You Do, The Elements of a Great Working Life, new book by Ellen Ratner. And hey, Victoria, what's on your mind today? What's happening in the world?
Joe Lieberman, the former Democratic and independent senator, is the front runner to be named FBI director, according to several White House officials and advisors.
Oh, save us all.
Yes, President Trump is expected to pick Lieberman to replace FBI Director James Comey. A person familiar with Wednesday's meeting, because he met yesterday, said Trump bonded with Lieberman.
In other words, Lieberman offered him his personal loyalty?
I don't know. The president left leaning towards him, and now Trump has not signaled otherwise. Apparently, according to aides, this is a Politico story, that anyone else is the favorite, and he has told one advisor he wants to make an announcement before he leaves tomorrow on his first foreign trip.
Does Lieberman have any law enforcement experience?
I do not believe that he does. He has a great deal of political experience, of course. He ran alongside Democrat Al Gore as his vice presidential candidate in 2000. Now, interestingly, he's 75 years old, and these are normally 10-year terms. He now works at the same law firm with Mark Kasowitz, who is Donald Trump's longtime lawyer in New York, which apparently might be an issue for some Democrats, according to a senior Democratic aide, who are thinking of opposing him.
Right. Right. Yeah, Lieberman is not beloved by many Democrats, as much as I've been hearing people singing his praises, especially his ripping the public option out of Obamacare.
So we'll see. Now, President Trump is holding a press conference this afternoon at 3:45 with the Colombian president, a joint press conference in the East Room. So it will be interesting to see if an announcement is made at that time or whether an announcement is made ahead of that time. That I've received no announcement emails. As you know, I get White House emails. There's been no announcement so far, but the president does leave on his 9-day foreign trip tomorrow.
What is the status of the witch hunt?
The status is, I've got a number of pieces for you on that, and I've got some other bits of news too. A number of bits on that. Well, the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is expected to be questioned this afternoon at 2:30 Eastern by all senators. This is a briefing by the entire Senate behind closed doors. So this will give them their first face-to-face questioning session with this administration.
And he has Comey's memos, right?
I don't know whether he has the memos, whether he has access to the memos, or what the status of the memos is.
Oh, I thought Comey had turned him over to the Justice Department when he left.
I believe that he has, but
Public Records Act and all that?
Yeah, I believe that he has. I don't know what he will say about them. Now, Senator Lindsey Graham was asked what he wanted to hear from Rosenstein, and he said it's pretty simple. Did you support the decision to fire Comey, and tell us about the letter and how it came about? That was one thing he said. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, now he's going to be asked to talk about the appointment of Robert Mueller as the special counsel, I'm quite sure. So
which I think was his effort to salvage his own reputation, frankly.
Well, I think also there was a fair amount of reporting that he was not happy that his memo reporting about Comey was being used by the White House as the reason why Comey was fired. That was up until the time when President Trump said that he was always going to fire him, and it had to, and he was thinking about the Russia investigation when he did it, because Rosenstein apparently said that the memo that he wrote had nothing to do with firing Comey. That was not the reason. There was also reporting that he threatened to quit.
Wow.
Then there was reporting saying that part of it was not true. So you pay your money and you take your choice on that.
Yeah, there you go.
So there is that. Also, ousted National Security Advisor Michael Flynn will not honor a subpoena issued by the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Oh, that's interesting. Are they going to hold him in contempt of Congress? I'm guessing they, being Republicans in charge, won't do that.
Well, they're not happy. Senator Richard Burr, who's the chairman, is saying we'll figure out on General Flynn what the next step is, if any. They've got to decide what to do next. It's considered not surprising that he's doing this, because that without an ironclad immunity deal, he would have been exposed to questioning from investigators about any personal documents he gave up. But they are going to decide what they're going to do next because they're not happy about it. Meanwhile, several White House advisors and personal associates of President Trump have advised him to hire an experienced outside lawyer to help him deal with issues arising from this entire matter.
Yes, and I understand that a lot of people around him are lawyering up right now.
Indeed. Also, the source of highly classified intelligence that President Trump discussed with Russia's foreign minister and ambassador is considered to be the best source for information regarding external plots by ISIS, according to a new report by the Wall Street Journal, citing intelligence officials.
This is the source that came out of Mossad, right? Out of Israel.
Yes, out of Israel, correct. Yes. Yes, so that's interesting to know. Also, late last month, Michael Flynn, again, met with a small group of loyalists at a restaurant in Virginia for dinner. And now you remember that President Trump has been told repeatedly not to be in touch with Flynn. And Flynn said towards the end of the dinner, I just got a message from the president to stay strong, he said after the dinner was over, according to two sources who are close to Flynn and are familiar with the conversation. Now, it's not known what form this message was, whether it was a written note, a text, a phone call, or something else, and the White House didn't respond to a request for comment to Yahoo News' Michael Isikoff. But that is what Flynn said, that he just got a message from the president to stay strong.
Of course, one of the things we've learned is that just because Michael Flynn says something doesn't mean it's true.
That is absolutely correct.
Yeah, fascinating. What else is up in the world?
Also today, Federal Communications Commission Chair Ajit Pai's plan to roll back net neutrality rules took its first step forward today. The Commission voted 2-1 along party lines to advance Pai's Restoring Internet Freedom proposal, which would repeal current net neutrality protections. So now there's a period of public input before the agency advances the proposal.
Well, they had public comments on their website for the last month, and 96% of the comments from actual humans rather than bots were opposed to their doing this. So what makes anybody think that public comments are going to do anything other than are going to change his mind? I mean, it looks to me like Ajit Pai is, he's looking at, a $2 million a year salary working for the telco companies when he leaves the FCC, if he can do this thing, if he can make them billions of dollars in profits.
He's already indicated in one interview that I saw that the comments wouldn't necessarily sway any kind of decision.
Right.
And the Financial Times is reporting that the Trump administration is considering extending a ban on laptops in aircraft cabins to all flights to the U.S. from anywhere in the world.
Wow. That's going to be real problematic. Are they going to, I realize the concern that they have is that it's difficult on these X-ray machines to tell the difference between a battery and a piece of plastic explosive shaped to look like a battery.
Right.
Are they going to exempt computers that have very, very small batteries, like the MacBook Air kind of thing?
There is nothing in the FT article that I've got saying that they would do that. They talk about lithium batteries, and so if it's a lithium battery, I guess it's going in the hole.
Where it could be even more dangerous. Amazing. Victoria Jones with Talk Media News. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
From United Nations.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from ADHD and the Edison Gene, a drug-free approach to managing the unique qualities of your child. A relatively new book by me. This is from the introduction. I was in India in 1993 to help manage a community for orphans and blind children on behalf of a German charity. During the monsoon season, the week of the big Hyderabad earthquake, I took an all-day train ride almost all the way across the subcontinent, from Bombay through Hyderabad to Rajahmundry, to visit an obscure town near the Bay of Bengal. In the train compartment with me were several Indian businessmen and a physician, and we had plenty of time to talk as the country flew by from sunrise to sunset. Curious about how they viewed our children diagnosed as having attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, I asked, are you familiar with those types of people who seem to crave stimulation, yet have a hard time staying with any one focus for a period of time? They may hop from career to career and sometimes even from relationship to relationship, never seeming to settle into one job or into a life with one person, but the whole time they remain creative, incredibly creative and inventive. Ah, we know this type well, one of the men said, the other three nodding in agreement. Well, what do you call this personality type? I asked them. Very holy, he said. These are old souls near the end of their karmic cycle. Again, the other three nodded agreement, perhaps a bit more vigorously in response to my startled look. Old souls, I questioned, thinking that a very odd description for those who American psychiatrists have diagnosed as having a particular disorder. Oh, yes, the physician said. In our religion, we believe that the purpose of reincarnation is to eventually free oneself from worldly entanglement and desire. In each lifetime, we experience certain lessons, and finally we are free of this earth and can merge into the oneness of God. When a soul is very close to the end of those thousands of incarnations, he must take a few lifetimes to do many, many things, to clean up all the little threads left over from his previous lifetimes. Another businessman added, this is a man very close to being enlightened. We have great respect for such individuals, although their lives may be difficult. Another businessman raised a finger and interjected, but it is through the difficulties of such lives that souls are purified. The others nodded agreement. I said, in America, they consider this behavior indicative of a psychiatric disorder. All three looked startled and then laughed. In America, you consider our most holy men, our yogis and swamis, to be crazy people as well, said the physician, with a touch of sadness in his voice. So it is with different cultures. We live in different worlds. We in the Western world have such holy and nearly enlightened people among us, and we say they must be mad. But as we're about to see, they may instead be our most creative individual, our most extraordinary thinkers, our most brilliant inventors and pioneers. To children among us, whom our teachers and psychiatrists say are disordered, they may in fact carry a set of abilities, a skill set that was necessary for the survival of humankind in the past. It has created much of what we presently treasure as our quality of life, and that will be critical to the survival of the human race in the future. There is immense power in how we choose to view what's happening around us. And this is terrifically important when we consider how we can best know our children and provide them with the upbringing they need, an upbringing that will lead them to be healthy, happy, functioning adults. The premise of this book is that children who have what we have come to know as ADHD are important and vital gifts to our society and culture, and in the largest sense can be an extraordinary gift to the world. In addition, for those adults who have been similarly diagnosed or defined, this book offers a new way of understanding themselves and their relationship to the world, a way that brings insight, empowerment, and success. The long history of the human race, as we'll see in this book, has conferred on us, some more than others, a set of predilections, temperaments, and abilities carried through the medium of our genetic makeup. These skills are ideally suited to life in the ever-changing world of our ancient ancestors, and we have now discovered are also ideally suited to the quickly changing modern world of cyberspace and widespread ecological and political crises that require rapid response. I will call this genetic gift the Edison gene, after Thomas Edison, who brought us electric lights and phonographs and movies and literally 10,000 other inventions. He is the model for the sort of impact a well-nurtured child carrying this gene can have on the world. While I'm principally referring to the DRD4 gene, see Chapter 5, the science of genetics is embryonic, with new discoveries being made every day. No doubt, sometime soon we'll have a better, more complete list of the specific genes that make up what Dave DeBronkart first called the Edison trait back in 1992, and Lucy Jo Palladino expanded on considerably in 1997 in her wonderful book, The Edison Trait. For the moment, though, I'll use the useful shorthand of the Edison gene. When Thomas Edison's school teacher threw him out of school in the 3rd grade for being fidgety, slow, and inattentive, his mother, Nancy Edison, the well-educated daughter of a Presbyterian minister, was deeply offended by the schoolmaster's characterization of her son. As a result, she pulled him out of school, and she became his teacher from then until the day he went off to work on his own for the railroads. And thus continues the story of people with ADHD and great success and how you can help your child be like that.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And tomorrow is the 92nd anniversary of the birth of Malcolm X, if I'm doing my math right here. And on the line with us is Zaid Mohammed, the founding press officer of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee, the website mxcc519.org. And Zaid, welcome to the program.
Pleasure to be aboard. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit, if you could, first about the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee, about your organization, and your thoughts on the legacy of Malcolm X.
Well, this Malcolm X Commemoration Committee is in its 25th year. The organization was actually initiated by several of Malcolm's former comrades from the Organization of Afro-American Unity. That was his secular organization that he formed after he left the Nation of Islam. And they included the late Yuri Kuchiyama, who was quite a bit of an international human rights legend in her own right before she joined Malcolm. John Henry Clark, a very highly regarded scholar on the World African Experience. And our founding chairman, Herman Ferguson, who actually tried to do some very direct action kind of things that made him a target of the FBI's COINTELPRO operations of that time, and he wound up living in exile for 20 years as a consequence. And when he tried to come back and clear his name, he found himself doing some of the time that he was initially targeted for. And then he was really the driving force for bringing some of his elder comrades, and at the time I was much younger, young people who were zealous about guarding Malcolm's legacy and using Malcolm's legacy and organizing formations as we had done to bring this legacy to another generation. At the time, there was a renewed interest in Malcolm's work. It was a difficult time in our community for a range of reasons. And it was also, like I said, he was just coming out of prison. He literally was just coming out of prison, and he saw that. It's also during the time of the Spike Lee movie that was about to hit, and many of us were concerned about Malcolm's legacy being commercialized, because Malcolm was a lot of things, but he definitely wasn't a commercial.
Right.
So we had some critical concerns that we brought to the community that we just wanted to know that there's some very basic tenets to this legacy that are very important to us that we don't want to see disrespected or distorted in a way that would take his legacy someplace else.
As has happened with so many others, in particular, for example, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King has been, in many quarters, particularly in the white media, turned into essentially a Disney character. You know, when he was brutally outspoken about the social justice issues and the anti-war issues of our times, and I mean that in a good way, brutally. And that whole edge has been just shaved off. So, what do you see as the essential legacy of Malcolm X, both within the African American community and within the society as a whole, within American society as a whole? What are the things that we know, we remember, you know, that have been highlighted? What are the things that we don't know that we should know? And how has his legacy shaped the current dialogue around race in the United States?
Well, I wish it was a bit more present, quite frankly. But there are remnants of it. We see remnants of it in certain pockets of organizing in our community. But in terms of the national dialogue, we really don't see the voices that had the principle, that had the clarity, that had the integrity, and that had the range that both Malcolm and Martin had during their time. Mm. We need those voices so badly now. It's incredible. I'm optimistic because what I see in younger people, I see them trying to reach for those legacies, to get their own anchor, to get their own foundations, to get their own footing for what they're trying to do. And some good things are happening, I think. They're not the kind of things that are on mainstream media, unfortunately. Mainstream media is very different now from what it was during those times. There was a place for debate and dialogue, even within the limited framework of that time.
Yeah.
We really don't see that hardly anymore these days. But Malcolm was important to the urban equation. He was important to the international human rights equation. He was important to so many differences. All the problems we have with what's wrong with this country right now, Malcolm would be on all of that like white on rice in this particular time.
Yeah, you said that there are some good things happening that are encouraging to you. What are they?
Well, I see positive things in young people.
For example?
In my area, for example. I remember one day I was literally coming from another event in Harlem, and there was a young group. I can't remember the name of the group. I think they called themselves the People's Assembly. I had no previous history with them, didn't know who they were at all. But they were literally on the street protesting the disrespectful service of a new entity in Harlem towards African-American residents. And they were literally, we call it mic checking. It's probably using a little hip-hop language, right? Mm-hmm. Quoting Martin Luther King extensively around the dignity of mankind and the whole quest for our dignity in their approach to corralling this audience, this to do what they were doing. So I was very pleased with that. In the same city, there's an organization called the Justice Committee that was the brainchild of a late comrade of mine who was in the Young Lord Party, Richie Perez. And, of course, the relationship between the Young Lord Party, the Black Panther Party, and Malcolm X and Albizu Campos is a very clear one. And so there's some things that they are doing that I'm very pleased with. They have this whole thing called Cop Watch, where they actually organize the community to observe police behavior in a way that gives people some chance of defending themselves legally when confronted with unfair circumstances with the police. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean anything when the police kill us, but anything short of that, we do stand to get some semblance of justice with the right kind of evidence. And there are other things like that. I mean, there's certain things happening on the college campuses. The Black Lives Matter movement for everything that it's trying to do is very strong in direct action. Very strong in direct action. We love that. I think, and they're very much a work in progress. They have had relationships with, and we're very serious about developing relationships with some of the elders who are still around from the movement, including some of my other comrades in the Black Panther Party. So there's some things that we're excited about. There is an energy that needs to be happening, and a lot of folks are just upset about what's going on. And so when something comes through that speaks with authority, speaks with clarity, and that reveals all the contradictions and can actually bring some folks together around some things we need to do, people respond. People are responsive. So there's a responsiveness that I'm also excited about.
With regard to police policy, we're seeing, some largely, I would argue, as the result of a disruptive technology. Everybody's got a cell phone with a camera in it now. But we're seeing even the white community waking up to what the day-to-day experience of the black community has been forever in this country in ways that I think are positive. But on the other hand, last night on my TV program, I did a long interview with a scholar who just wrote a book about the racial wealth gap. And he pointed out that if you go from the time of Reagan until today, that the average white family's wealth has pretty much tripled. It's gone from around 80,000 to around 200 and something thousand. Whereas the average black family in the United States wealth has actually gone down slightly from around 5,000 to around 4,900. Which is, compared to hundreds of thousands. I mean, this is a massive wealth gap. Can you speak to the economics of all this? I realize this isn't purely an economic thing. And it's driven by white supremacy and the structural stuff around all that. But can you speak to that, please?
Well, I would absolutely couple to that the acceleration of the incarceration rate of Black and Latino men and women during the same period.
Yeah.
Right, and the fact that a lot of that has been privatized. We have a new attorney general who's committed to the private corporation as prisoner. As jailer, and it's so there's all of those things are very much a serious problem and reflective of what's wrong with the country right now. What's wrong with the economy?
What would Malcolm have said is the solution to this?
Well, right now, I would he said so many things.
Yeah.
I'll just say this because in the back of my, and I know because one of the things that are pressing in people's minds in the media right now is this Russian connection with the Trump election. Well, folks in my community have another investigation that they're concerned about, and that's how Trump forces orchestrated to repress millions of black voters as soon as the Shelby versus Alabama state dropped in 2013.
Right.
But
and they gutted the Civil Rights Act.
The bullet.
The Voting Rights Act.
Ballot of the Bullet. Malcolm did an extension critique of what was wrong with white supremacy within the government framework at the time, including a challenge to white liberals. That was, Malcolm had no problems being as hard on liberals as he was on everybody else. Yeah. And literally the Dixiecrats have become the Republicans.
Yeah.
And so this is something that's not rocket science, and like he would challenging us to organize in terms of in whatever mass formations that we could come up with to oppose this backwards rightward trend that's really got this whole the whole human order in some serious trouble.
We're talking to Zaid Mohammed, the founding press officer of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee, mxcc519.org. We have a little less than a minute left. What would you recommend for people who are not that familiar with Malcolm or his legacy? Where should they start? Is there a place on the internet? Is there a book? Is it your site? What?
Well, I'll tell you, the autobiography of Malcolm X has been saving lives literally since it was printed. It saved my life in 1977, long before I became the kind of person who would be on your show. I was very much like his Detroit Red character in the streets of Essex and Union County, on my way to prison, had I not read that book. For young people, they would start there. I think some of the best things online, there was great scholarship that came out of the community during the same period. That's all available now at brothermalcolm.net.
Great.
And William Sales and Abdullah Kalimat and a number of scholars who were close to the Malcolm X conferences that were put down during that period. All of that work, all of the basic archival stuff with Malcolm is there. Great place for folks.
Great stuff. Zaid Mohammed, thanks so much for being with us today.
Pleasure's all mine.
Great talking. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back in just a second. I'm going to play a clip of Malcolm X for you, and we'll pick up your phone calls. And welcome back. Lloyd in Plummer, Idaho. Hey, Lloyd, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind? Lloyd? Come on, Lloyd. You're my only Free Speech TV caller on the board. You got to be there. No? Okay. I'm going to put Lloyd on hold. Lloyd's been on hold for 50 minutes. I'm sorry, Lloyd. You got to, you put the phone on speaker or something if you got to listen to it. The fascinating piece in the New York Times, Louise, if you want to pick him up, he's on line 9 and see what's going on, and you can tell me if he's there and we can put him on the air. Jeremy Peters wrote a fascinating piece in the New York Times. It's titled, "The Right Builds an Alternative Narrative About the Crises Around Trump." And Roger Stone says, they're going to say that Donald Trump has Alzheimer's. This is the game plan. Watch carefully. Laura Ingraham, the conservative radio host and author, she says, there's someone burrowed into the intelligence community who wants to hurt Trump. Matt Drudge says, President Trump once called out the Washington Post's owner, Jeff Bezos, for potential antitrust violations. Oh, my God. Therefore, and Jeff Bezos, of course, owns the Washington Post now. So, that's why the Washington Post is talking about Donald Trump. This article, Alex Castellanos, a Republican strategist, says, and this is, I think, something important and, interesting. He says, Trump supporters see the news media and the establishment as one of those airlines dragging them down the aisle, bloodying them. Said Alex Castellanos, a Republican strategist, who said that Mr. Trump's foes often fail to understand how their criticism can backfire. And when they assault him, it validates the idea that he's the only thing there to protect us from them. Seriously. He goes on to say, anyone who assumes widespread defections against the president in short order should understand that many of Mr. Trump's fans are not eager to see a return to the establishment-dominated political order that he promised to demolish. This gets, really amazing. Gallup, not a partisan polling organization, Gallup reported that Donald Trump's approval among Republicans this week is 84%. 84%. And the article writes, the author of the article, Jeremy Peters, writes, Mr. Trump and his aides have already started playing to the mistrust that many Americans have with our country's political and media establishment. The message was classic us versus them battle cry. They want their power back. We can't let them have it. In the conservative media, an alternative storyline has already taken shape, writes Mr. Peters. In this story, Mr. Comey, an embittered and opportunistic employee whom Mr. Trump fired, is now trying to redeem himself with retroactively released and unseen memos of his version of events. On Fox and Friends on Wednesday morning, one of the hosts, Brian Kilmeade, expressed disbelief. If you write it down, does that mean it's true, he said? And then he goes on to say the Washington Post, there was a story in which that Matt Drudge smeared all over Drudge Report, that the Washington Post newsroom erupted into cheers when its story on Trump's disclosure of intelligence to the Russians broke. The headline on Drudge, Wash Post newsroom staff openly applauding that latest Trump hit finally clarifies how this has turned into nothing but a blood sport. A reporter for the Post had actually written on Twitter that the newsroom applauded when the story broke an online traffic record. Had nothing to do with it being pro or anti-Trump. It was that they hit, they had goals for, how many people are reading their tweets or their articles. And, but boy, it's getting strange out there. It's getting very strange. We'll be right back. Do you remember Malcolm X? Got thoughts on him? Tomorrow is his 92nd birthday, and here's a clip. This is Malcolm X speaking at the University of Ghana, May 13th, 1964, and we are trying to make it work. Maybe we'll have to come back to it. You think you got it, Nate? Okay, here we go. Oh, that doesn't look like it. We lost it. Okay, we'll come back to it after the break. Yeah, we'll come back to it after the break. Norvale in Southfield, Michigan. Hey, Norvale. Thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind today?
Been listening to your show, a new listener.
Thank you.
I heard you on Karen Hunter, and I have been peeking in your show once or twice before, but when I heard the interview on Karen Hunter, you really convinced me, like, I got to listen. I really have to.
Well, thank you. Karen is wonderful, isn't she?
Oh, she's like a big sister. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, she's brilliant.
But when your guest was talking about net neutrality and how it would, eliminating that would open up the basically the coffers and allow business to grow in different things, that was pure caca.
I agree. I agree.
He doesn't seem to understand. It's what they're trying to do with net neutrality is the same thing that they did with the banks. It's the same thing that they did with the telephone company, if you look at it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, what everybody forgets is that what the Republicans call old Saint Reagan, when he deregulated the FCC, this is what allowed all this to come, because we would not be at this, we would not be in these crosshairs had he not deregulated the FCC and took so much power away.
Yeah.
That's why you got Comcast owning NBC. Okay?
Yeah, and owning, the ability to be the only consequential internet provider to large chunks of America.
Right, and then you got AT&T, who, okay, if everybody remembered, they broke them up just to have Southern Bell buy everything up and then link up with AT&T again.
Yeah, they broke. Yeah, Jimmy Carter and Richard Nixon broke AT&T into 7 companies plus Bell Labs, as I recall, which became Lucent Technologies.
Right, and see, I have a business that runs on the internet, so I'm like, okay, think about what this does to small businesses.
Yep.
So, in essence, you're getting rid of net neutrality, saying that bigger corporations can grow and eliminate smaller businesses. Doesn't that sound like what went on with the banking industry? That there were 800 and some odd banks before we had, the real estate crash, and now you only have a couple of big banks, which one of them, Wells Fargo, is still in hock because of the illegal practices they've pulled. So really, do we want to go down this road again?
Yeah, I would think not. I mean, that's my whole argument, is that this whole idea of it's weird, because the right-wing sales pitch, and again, right-wing no longer has anything to do with William F. Buckley or Russell Kirk or conservative principles or Barry Goldwater or anything. Right-wing now means being a shill for big corporations and billionaires. That's what it means, period, full stop. And the right-wing sales pitch is, we need to get the heavy hand of government off the internet service providers, those poor little companies like Comcast and Time Warner and AT&T, the heavy hand. And really what they're saying is that they want their heavy hand to be around your and my necks, as it already is to a large extent. Norvale, thanks so much for the call. Thanks for listening to Sirius XM. And give my best to Karen if you talk to her.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
As in, if you call into her show, tell her we're speaking well of her over here. We'll be back.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann Book Club with Thom Hartmann University. The book we're reading today is The American Revolution of 1800, written by Dan Sisson with a little bit of help from me and mostly edited by me. I wrote a foreword for it. But it's an absolutely brilliant history of the election of Thomas Jefferson and the times. So reading from chapter 1, page 9. Starting out, a quote from Thomas Paine. "For it is the nature and intention of a constitution to prevent governing by party." Oh, really? So often in the past century, the political history of America reveals a paralysis in the highest levels of our government. Legislation fails to pass, budgets are voted down, compromise seems impossible, and the problems of the nation are neither addressed nor solved. There have been brief periods, of course, when this was not the case. The New Deal is usually held up as an example of a time when American politicians actually came together to fundamentally transform the nature and the political landscape of our country. But in the generations since then, more often than not, we've seen gridlock rather than collaboration. Conventional wisdom says that's the way it should be. The founders of this country, the men who wrote the Constitution, wanted there to be a loyal opposition to serve as a balance against excessive power in the hands of any one political party or even president. That's conventional wisdom. Not only is that not true, but this pervasive myth has done considerable harm to our nation and continues to do so. The men in power from 1790 to 1801 did not even remotely conceive of the modern two-party system. In fact, the opposite is true. They wish to consolidate and perpetuate a one-party system in politics in the United States, and were successful in their lifetimes. The terms party and faction have had such a long history that they were widely assumed by American statesmen to be part of human nature. This, at least, was the approach taken by the two men most responsible for establishing the theoretical guidelines of the early republic, the early American Republic. James Madison and Alexander Hamilton attempted to analyze the terms in light of their influence on the political system. Their Federalist essays presented an analysis of party and faction that is more than consistent with the history of the terms we've reviewed. Madison referred to the violence of faction as a dangerous vice characteristic of free governments. By faction, Madison wrote, I understand a number of citizens, whether amounting to a majority or a minority of the whole, who are united and actuated by some common impulse of passion or of interest adverse to the rights of other citizens, or to the permanent and aggregate interests of the community. In other words, faction is anti-America. He continued, the latent causes of faction are thus sown in the nature of man, and we see them everywhere. Thus, party, as Madison understood it, was not something of recent origin. Parties have been around since the beginning of man. And he noted, quote, the most numerous party, or in other words, the most powerful faction, must be expected to prevail. He ends his analysis on this note. To secure the public good and provide rights against the danger of such a faction, that is then the great object to which our inquiries are directed. Thus, Madison captured the essence of the term faction and party as they were understood by his contemporaries. The faction and party were inescapably rooted in human nature and produced violence, zeal, animosity, oppression, and danger, all adverse to the interests of the community. He added, quote, men of factious tempers, or of local prejudices, or of sinister designs may by intrigue, by corruption, or by other means, first obtain the suffrages, the vote, and then betray the interests of the people. His conclusion is that factions must be broken and controlled. They are at all costs not to be legitimately recognized or encouraged. Madison was not alone in his aversion to faction and party. Alexander Hamilton, too, warns the reader, quote, ambition, avarice, personal animosity, party opposition, and many other motives, not more laudable than these, were typical of that intolerant spirit which has at all times characterized political parties, end of quote. Registering his disgust for faction, Hamilton continued, it is impossible to read the history of the petty republics of Greece and Italy without feeling sensations of horror and disgust at the rapid succession of revolutions by which they were kept in a state of perpetual vibration between the extremes of tyranny and anarchy. Hamilton, we might note, connects ancient history with modern America. The tempestuous situation, he writes, from which Massachusetts has scarcely emerged, he was talking about Shays' Rebellion, evinces the dangers of this kind are not merely speculative. Who could determine what might have been the issue of her late convulsions if the malcontents had not been headed by a Caesar or a Cromwell, end of quote. In Federalist number 77, he describes the influence of faction and party intrigue, connections, and, quote, personal influence in government in a way that was characteristic of the terms from classical times through the age of Robert Walpole. Hamilton wrote, every mere council of appointment, however constituted, will be a conclave in which cabal and intrigue will have their full scope. And as each member will have his friends and connections to provide for, the desire of mutual gratification will beget a scandalous bartering of votes and bargaining for places. What is worth noting here is not only Hamilton's description of the influence of party and faction upon an administration, but his general description of politics. He's describing the politics of England for the previous century and a half. Moreover, he understands that encouraging party and faction at the theoretical as well as the practical level guaranteed that the emergent system of American politics would be propelled into the futile violence and dissension that had plagued every republic in history. Throughout the remainder of his political career, Hamilton reserved a special contempt for parties. The American Revolution of 1800 by Dan Sisson and Thom Hartmann.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Nate, do we have our Malcolm X video queued up? Give me, okay, 2 seconds. Tomorrow is the 92nd birthday. Our guest was available today, so we're talking about this today. And here we go.
Politics. In fact, I'm not a student of much of anything. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I don't even consider myself an American. If you and I were Americans, there'd be no problem. Those hunkies that just got off the boat, they're already Americans. The Polacks are already Americans. The Italian refugees are already Americans. Everything that came out of Europe, every blue-eyed thing is already an American. And as long as you've been over here, as long as you and I have been over here, we aren't Americans yet. Well, I am one who doesn't believe in deluding myself. I'm not going to sit at your table and watch you eat with nothing on my plate and call myself a diner. Sitting at the table doesn't make you a diner. You must be eating some of what's on that table.
May 13th, 1964. And I'll tell you well, I shouldn't be the one to say it because I don't know it from personal experience, but my sense of it is that the black experience in the United States since 1964 has, in many ways improved, but obviously we still have a long way to go. But Malcolm was speaking some very, very serious truths there, I think. Tony in Los Angeles, you want to talk about Malcolm X?
Hi. I just wanted to talk about his legacy, too, in the sense that so many people want to talk about the violence. And like you said, what did he ever do? That he didn't kill and go out and mass kill white folks or anything. So people really need to do their homework. Yeah. And first, also, I wanted to thank you for promoting this today, too.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And though his birthday is, like you said, is tomorrow. Yeah. But I think what is so true about what he's saying that's still so true now, the main thing is his message to black people is stop begging, build yourself, do everything that every other minority group, say Asian people or whoever who have come here. If you notice, they're not trying to integrate and become a part of a system that doesn't like them. They just build their own communities and do what they have to do and live well. And that's the fallacy too many black people have that I think Martin Luther King's legacy has, even though I respect the man and he gave his life. But I think, trying to appeal to somebody to think they have a conscience when they don't, that's the fallacy of that whole thing. I think black people are waking up, finally figuring out, hey, integrate for what?
Yeah. Well, and America has essentially resegregated over the last 20 years or so, and there's a big debate, or at least a big discussion in academic circles about why that is, whether it's the consequence of economic pressure, whether it's social pressure, whether it's the kind of natural human tendency for people to hang out with people like them, whether it's age or weight or race or whatever, it's or geography or religion.
Right. It's the racism. It just never went anywhere. I think also the message that Malcolm would give to white people, and especially white liberals, is the fact that this racism is still here because you're complicit in it as well. If when that flag Confederate flag came down. Black people have been fighting for that forever. It wasn't until the white people decided that it was going to come down that it came down.
Yeah, and that's
You
a
see
huge.
what I mean? So basically, that's what he's saying. I would think he would say to white people. Now, this whole election of Cheeto Leahy has brought about that white people have to face the fact that there are racist white people, not just Bubba and Cooter, but all the way up the corporate chain. And that's what I think white America does not want to admit to itself, is that how racist this country really is to the core.
And they're showing up with torches. I mean, literally last week. It's they're, you know, to defend their Confederate memorials and all this kind of stuff. It's just extraordinary. Tony, thank you for your comments.
Either.
Good talking with you. Thank you so much. Let's see here, Vicky in Bessemer, Alabama. Hey, Vicky, what's on your mind today? You want to talk net neutrality?
Hi, thank you so much. This is my first time, and I want to make two comments. I see that you're talking about Malcolm X's birthday tomorrow, and that reminds me, I was watching, I believe it was the Washington Journal, a call-in program similar to yours today, and a Republican caller was complaining about California Democrats, and it was a really a bashing of the person that was there taking the call, you know, the guest on the program. But at any rate, over the notion of this term white supremacy that's being used now, and I just want to say that that call got me to thinking about the woman who was making the call. She really resented the term white supremacist, you know, and herself, I think, having at one time been a Democrat or something. But after that call was over, I got to thinking about how she could try to just imagine that she was for instance, these millions of Mexicans who are incorporated into our society being upheaved and just carted off and out of the country and out of sight, and how she could maybe imagine that what's important to think about is how she feels about essential life and death questions of humanity. Yeah. And you know, because she thinks that somehow she's not seeing the depth of it. It's what she needs to understand.
Yeah, I wonder if she had been confronted with, or not confronted with, but if she had been caused to think about male supremacy, it would have provided a context in which she could empathize, she could understand.
I think that even that is difficult for us to get our minds around unless we have a lot of time to meditate on it. I'm a 55-year-old woman, and I'm only now beginning to see that we're a patriarchal culture. You know, not families necessarily, but the government and and all of our institutions
and our religions. I mean, this all, you know, arguably goes back to our founding myths. You know, that the first human created was a man, that the woman was created out of his rib and subordinate to him, that she was the one who was up to no good, and she caused him to fall into sin, and as a result of that, every man who has been born of a woman, which is all men, have this original sin as a consequence, which they must have purged from them because they came out of a woman. I mean, talk about a story that defines patriarchy, you know, or rationalizes patriarchy, provides an excuse for patriarchy.
Yeah, women couldn't even considered to be fully human, you know, for the great
until the 1950s in the United States, in many states, you know, and in some cases the 1960s, women had a hard time, you know, owning property, or had a hard time suing at law, or doing things without the permission of their husbands. I remember in the 1970s, Louise and I were married in 71 or 72, and I remember I could get a credit card, she couldn't unless I signed for it for her. And because she was, and it wasn't about money, it was about male and female. This is, you know, back in the days when the Help Wanted ad said, you know, men wanted, women wanted, right? And the women wanted ads were all secretarial positions, and the men wanted positions were everything else. You know, we've come a long way from then, but we still have a very, very highly patriarchal society. And you look at...
been natural then for Caucasians coming, into the Americas or stopping by Africa or whatever to just label people as less human.
Yep.
Look different because it was already there applying to women.
Well, and it was already there in the Bible. I mean, slavery was endorsed in the Bible.
So I didn't really say it quite as well as I wanted to, but but the thing is, I think that is that we tend to have these just knee-jerk reactions to people having upstart kinds of attitudes that don't, where we don't seem to have a dog in the game,
Mm-hmm.
and because that was really all it amounted to. She didn't say anything deep. That she was really irate over having to have these concepts presented to her. Yeah. So and then the other thing, I wanted to say something about net neutrality too.
Okay, you got 10 seconds, Vicki.
Okay, all right. The thing is I can't have my own YouTube channel because I don't want to be made public if I'm not going to have protection.
There you go. Okay, thank you, Vicki. Thank you very much. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
So what do you think about Joe Lieberman as the FBI director? I'm not enthusiastic, but I'm just generally not a fan of Joe. But maybe? And welcome back. Yeah. So let's see, an old disease. Oh, I gotta share this news story with you. Trump wants to gut energy program with highest job potential and rate of return. This is Joe Romm. Joe Romm's an actual scientist. He's got a PhD. He's the founding editor of Climate Progress. The New York Times calls it an indispensable blog. It appears over at thinkprogress.org. And he writes, the Trump administration wants to slash the Department of Energy. Now, keep in mind, the Department of Energy, the DOE, is now run by Rick Perry, who has to change his glasses to make people think he has an IQ above room temperature, at least according to Donald Trump. The Trump administration wants to slash the Department of Energy's investment in energy efficiency and renewable energy by 70%, according to a draft budget obtained by Axios. Even setting aside the issues of air pollution and climate change, gutting renewable energy and efficiency runs counter to the president's stated commitment to economic growth and job creation. All this fancy way of saying, the bottom line here is that, the most new jobs that are being created in America right now, the largest number, the largest percentage, the largest proportions of new jobs being created in the United States right now are in the clean energy sector. We're looking at, in 2015, 8.1 million jobs in just 2015. I mean, even in this country, clean energy jobs already outnumber fossil fuel jobs by 2.5 to 1, 250% more of them. China is making a huge investment in renewable energy, and they're estimating they just budgeted $360 billion for clean energy, and they're estimating that this will lead to the employment of 13 million people. Our National Academy of Sciences found that an $11 million, keep in mind, China's investing $360 billion, that an $11 million investment in a handful of energy efficiency technologies in the United States returned $30 billion in energy savings. So, why is the Trump administration and the Department of Energy, why do they want to do this crazy stuff? I mean, it just makes no sense to me. No sense at all. David, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, David, I'm sorry I didn't see you on the board there. We have just a minute to the break. A quick thought on net neutrality?
Okay. Yes, you keep mentioning that AT&T might buy out Time Warner. That's a little bit old. Time Warner was bought out by Charter Communications about a year ago, and they changed the name to Spectrum, and now makes them the second biggest ISP next to Comcast. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that I went to check the date online when they were bought out, and it says that Verizon may be buying Charter or Spectrum.
Right. and Sprint's, in this game too. I don't remember exactly how, but we're going to end up with just like with every industry. We got basically 4 airlines that run the country. You got basically 4 giant food companies that run the country. You have 4. I mean, we're just 4 major banks, maybe 5. I mean, this is what it's going to come to. And once the numbers get that small, they all start behaving like, hey, I mean, look at what's happening with the airlines. Talk back, get dragged out. David, thank you for the call. And of course, customer service and everything else. But it's not just that. It's like, finding out new ways to rip us off, monetize us, and get all the information they can about us so that they can sell it and make more money on us. Be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Damien in Manorville, New York. Hey, Damien, what's on your mind?
Hey, what's going on? I just didn't know if you had heard about that professor in Yale talking poorly about white people, white trash and, low-life morons. And there's a woman who is the cultural sensitivity dean. So my point that I'm calling about is this idea of white privilege. I think you have to consider there's something called minority privilege, because if this was a white person saying this about any minority population, they'd be fired. This woman made an apology, not even to the people she was talking about, but only to the Yale faculty and alumni, and she's allowed to stay. So I think that if you look at the amount of people out there who talk poorly about white people, all you have to do is ask yourself, what would that be like if it was flipped around?
So let me get this straight, Damien. Let me see if I understand what you're saying. So what you're saying is that in addition to my and presumably your white privilege, in that we don't have to wake up in the morning and wonder, are we going to get shot today if we get stopped by the police because of the color of our skin? Will I still be able to keep my job or even get a job because of the color of my skin? Am I going to be treated badly in a restaurant because of the color of my skin? Am I going to, am I going to have, bad encounters in public or in the workplace? Because not only do we not have to worry about any of that, but we also shouldn't have to worry about trashing people of color verbally. Is that what you're saying? You want to add that to white privilege?
That if there should be one standard, all right, one standard that if you're talking poorly about a group of people, that person, if you're going to fire white people...
So you want to add that standard to white privilege. You're saying that oppressed people should not be able to speak of their oppressors, but oppressors should be able to speak poorly of the oppressed, in addition to all the other cool things that come along with being white, like the average family household wealth being $280,000, where the average family wealth of a black family is $4,900. Black teen unemployment is 49%, white teen unemployment is 15%, stuff like that. In addition to all of that, that you feel put upon, and Damien, you're sounding like a friggin' snowflake here. You're so sad that as a white guy, you can't sit around and in public be applauded for trash talking minorities.
So you're saying minorities should be able to talk however they want?
I'm saying that you are a pathetic snowflake, Damien. That's what I'm saying. And I'm moving along. Lorenzo in Philadelphia. Hey, Lorenzo, what's on your mind?
How you doing?
I'm well.
I listen to your show all the time. I go in between Joe Madison and yourself.
Thank you. Joe's a genius. He's a good man.
White supremacy. I think it gives context and credence to what people see as a reality. I think we should call it what it is. It's terrorism.
Yes.
And unless we start using the word terrorism to white supremacy, because there is no one supreme over anyone. When we say black power, or white supremacy, these terms have an effect. But when I see the news messages that are to keep people calm. They don't want any disturbance. Right. So the media's not going to give you the truth.
Right, it's the old bread and circus trick.
And on your show, I believe that can happen. We stop calling them white supremacists because they're not supreme over anyone. What they are people who have fear in their hearts of something that is not true. Blacks are not going to take over people's jobs. I mean, we built this. My ancestors, I believe, their blood is in the soils of Virginia and North Carolina and all the other places. Their bodies lay at the bottom of the ocean that couldn't make it here to be slaves. So when we think about the atrocities and the miracles and the abilities of a folk who came here to build this land and didn't get paid for it, and you have people jealous of them, I can't seem to fathom that. And then to perpetuate during the Jim Crow movement this white supremacy. You know, this is all smoke and mirrors to maintain the poverty-minded thinking of white poor. I don't believe wealthy even care about supremacy. I believe wealthy care about money. It's the brain dead that carry this white supremacy.
Well, and in the context of the terrorists, I would remind people that our Attorney General, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, wants to bring back, or has already done it, I guess, brought back minimum mandatory sentencing and harsher penalties for, particularly for nonviolent drug offenses and all kinds of things. I mean, we had about 70,000 federal prisoners when Reagan came into jail, and that was way up from Nixon starting the war on drugs. It peaked at 280 some odd thousand just before Obama. Obama took it down to 230,000. Jeff Sessions wants to get it up to 500,000, in my opinion, and that's just federal. And so you've got that kind of terrorism. You got the terrorism of the guys, the white guys who showed up in, I think it was North Carolina earlier this week with torches at night, you know, saying you're not going to take down our Confederate memorials. I would say those Confederate memorials and the whole Confederate flag thing is the equivalent of ISIS waving a flag saying, look out, we're watching you.
I agree. And that we need not be fearful of that. We need to stop saying, oh, white supremacy, you know, because it brings a connotation of fear. When we wipe that word away and say it's terror, we got to start saying the terror, then you know, they're terrorists, and we need to treat them as such.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Lorenzo, thank you very much for the call. Good to hear from you. And a great juxtaposition to the call just before you. Thanks so much for being with us today. It's been a fascinating day. There's a lot going on worth paying attention to. We'll be back with more tomorrow. And in the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. Never was, never will be. If we want to have a functioning republic here, we need your help. Get out there, get active, tag. You're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. You may have seen the footage by now. On Tuesday, members of Turkish President Recep Erdogan's security detail were taped beating up Kurdish protesters and their American supporters at a demonstration in Washington, D.C. In the video, dozens of men in black suits, some of them armed with guns, punched, kicked, and shoved protesters gathered near the Turkish embassy. At one point, two different bodyguards walk up to a man who's already fallen on the sidewalk and kick him violently in the face. DC police, meanwhile, outnumbered, tried to calm everyone down, but at points seemed to let the Turkish bodyguards off the hook, simply pushing them away from the brawl. The incident has prompted calls for the bodyguards to be prosecuted for assault. Senator John McCain on Thursday morning threatened even stronger punishments for Turkey.
As I say, I'd throw the ambassador out. This kind of thing cannot go unresponded to diplomatically.
But as of late Wednesday, D.C. police said no Turkish personnel had been arrested. The guards are covered under diplomatic immunity, and Erdogan and his security detail have already departed the United States. That's left the State Department to muster a diplomatic slap on the wrist. Spokesman Heather Nauert said in a statement that the U.S. is, quote, communicating our concern to the Turkish government in the strongest possible terms. Turkey, meanwhile, isn't apologizing. The embassy in Washington has accused protesters of being aligned with Kurdish factions it views as terrorists. And on Thursday, Turkey asked that the U.S. envoy leading the fight against the Islamic State resign, saying it was inappropriate for Brett McGurk to be overseeing policies that sees the U.S. supporting Kurdish groups fighting in Syria. For more global news headlines, visit talkmedianews.com.
Hey, it's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, and today we're reading from Robert Draper's book, When the Tea Party Came to Town. And it was actually the original title of this book when it first came out was called Do Not Ask What Good We Do. And this is the only book that tells the story of how the Republicans got together the night that Barack Obama was being inaugurated and decided that for the next 4 or 8 years they were going to do everything they could to destroy our first black president's presidency. And so I'm reading from the prologue, and he's talking about how Frank Luntz had organized that dinner that I was just mentioning. He was very happy about that. The dinner tables were set in a square. This was at the Caucus Room restaurant in a private dining room, a little restaurant down at the corner of 9th and D Street. The dinner tables were set in a square at Luntz's request so that everyone could see each other and talk freely. He asked that Gingrich speak first. Gingrich was happy to oblige. And, you know, it goes on through this. Pete Huckster said, so we're in the depths. And then we get right into it. They would take back that this was their plan. You know, what their party had done from 94 to 2000, what the Democrats had done from 2006 and 2008, the Republicans would want to do again. They would take back the House in November 2010. Then they would use the House as the Republican spear point to mortally wound President Obama in 2011. They would do this and retake the House and the Senate in 2012. They would do all this, but only if the American voter blessed them to do so. It made no sense they all agreed to attack Obama personally. He was too popular. Got to be about ideas, said Eric Cantor. Democrats now controlled everything and were already with a monstrously priced economic stimulus package showing their true colors. Given time, they'd screw things up, as the GOP had. But, said Paul Ryan, everyone's got to stick together. Ryan, a 38-year-old Wisconsin congressman and numbers fetishist whose shiny earnestness recalled an Ozzie and Harriet America. Ryan hated squabbling among conservatives, the paleos versus the neos, the socials against the moderates, and on for as long as he'd been on the Hill, which was most all of his adult life. Ryan had long sought to be the Republican Party's glue, pleading for adherence to principles and data. At times, he looked like the underfed, hollow-eyed child of alcoholic parents. Well, the only way we'll succeed is if we're united, Ryan told the others. If we tear ourselves apart, we're finished. But, he added, he liked what he was